Go ahead and unmute there, and then once the live stream catches up with the real world, we will be started. Live stream. How's everyone doing? I got a couple people in the chat, it looks like. No way to see who until people speak up. And, of course, Peter being one of them. Now we got 4, so... All right. Yeah, here for new episode. Looks like Mark's here. How's it going, Mark? You got the chat there as well?
Oh, I had my, ready for...
intro.
Stuff. Yeah. Because it's like, I have to... Every time I switch between screens on my phone, I have to go from top chat to live chat. Then I hit live and...
Yeah, we also have Zach from Tampa. That's a newer name. I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember if you've been with us before, Zach. If not, welcome. If you have, then just forgive my memory. It is not good.
It sucks. it's literally terrible. It's one of the worst.
Yeah, there was something recently too where I was like, I can't even remember what it was, but it was like I saw something posted somewhere. Somebody's like, have you ever read a book almost all the way through, or even all the way through, and not realize that you'd already read it? And they had jumped on some review place to and that's actually happened to me, and I was like, how does that happen? How do you read a whole freaking book and not realize it? Not have one thing that jogs your memory where it's like, I remember this. And then you go to review it or something, and it's like, wait a minute, I've already read this.
There's my review from 9 years ago. Wait a minute, what the hell?
Yeah, Zax has never been in the chat. Okay, awesome. Well, welcome. Yeah, I don't know. That trips me out though, because that's like a wider memory loss. That's not just why did I walk into a room, but to read a whole book and not have anything jog your memory. Because there's been times I have been mostly had forgotten, but then when I read a line or something, I'll be like, God, that's so fucking familiar. I think I may have read this before. And then a few other things will jog me and I'll be, oh yeah, I have read this, but to go through the whole thing, yeah, I want to see what happened to me is I had read it on, or whether it was Kindle or audiobook or something. And then when I happened to be moving, and as I was looking through boxes, I found a hard copy of the book, and it was one you could kind of I had a bookmark right toward the end where I'm like, I fucking read this before.
I've read this. That's not nearly as good as the example I was going to give. I mean, last time we recorded, you're like, yeah, 7:30 is time for Captain Marvel. 7:30 on Thursday. Yeah, okay, man. I'll see you there. I'll see you at the theater. We'll be there. Text me the day of the show. 7:30. I told you, didn't I? It's like, yeah, you told me after we recorded.
Oh, yeah. You never know. Looks like we also have Robert in Rhode Island. So yeah, we got a good crew here. So yeah, we're going to get started. Let me go ahead and hit the intro, and we will get rolling on it. This will be a fun episode. We're getting into the heat of things here.
Yeah.
And I also was telling Peter via text. I'm now reading because I started my last my next Dark Tower cycle. I told everyone our last roundtable that I was going to finish up Pet Sematary and then start the Dark Tower. I've done that. I've gone through all of book 1, and I'm now into book 2. And doing show prep for this, where we're midway through the book, and then also normally reading the book, and I'm at the beginning of the getting Eddie intro before Roland even goes to the door, and I'm like, this isn't working. My brain is discombobulated here because I'm reading this book from 2 different angles at the moment.
I told him that time travel shit will mess with your mind.
Yeah, it definitely does. I was. But I'm guessing though, with the way we do, 2 round tables before another book club, I'm guessing I'll be done with book 2 by the time we come back to a book club again. So yeah, I mean, I'm almost certain. I went through book 1 pretty quick, and that one, even still, there's times where I'm the style of it is oh man, I want to get to book 2 because I don't know. We obviously know how.
Yeah,
good
but
book 2
but then is it worse? You're rushing through book 1. I got to get through book 1. I want to get to book 2, but then you get to book 2, and all of a sudden you're 3/4 of the way through it, and you go, son of a bitch, I read that so fast because I wanted to read it.
Yeah. I will say, and we got Agamorphy in the chat as well. How's it going? I also wanted to say I came to a conclusion. I've got one that's a kind of backwards. There's one that I think George Guidel I like better than I like Frank Muller.
No.
Yeah, because again, audiobooks is most what I do because at work, driving, times I have to read is a lot less than it used to be. I think Court's voice is very much better with George Guidel. I feel like he so far the few times we've heard his voice in the second book, which is obviously to Frank Muller. I'm just like, it just doesn't sound as good. It doesn't sound like as gruff as like whatever. So I don't know. It was weird because like if you would have asked me, you know, like, hey, you haven't read the series in a year or more, you know, is there anything that you liked George Guidel over Frank Miller? I would have said no. Like in my mind, my brain would have said no. Guidel he's good, but he's not as good as Frank. But there's something about the way Guidel does the voice of Court that I was like, huh, interesting. That's a very, very rare one, I think. But so let's go ahead and hit the intro real quick now that we're like, I don't know, I guess this all before the show is like, I don't know, less spoiler. Once we hit the intro, though, because then it'll be in the podcast.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and hit the intro and get going.
The Dark Tower by Stephen King. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed. Go then. There are other worlds than these. Death, not for you, gunslinger. It's time we had our own palaver, I think, and it's going to take a while.
And yet, dauntless, the slug horn to my lips I set and blew. Child Roland to the Dark Tower came.
We are quartet, one from many. The palaver begins.
Hello and welcome to Dark Tower Palaver. This is our podcast covering Stephen King's Magnum Opus, the Dark Tower series. My name is Tad,
and I'm Peter.
You're smiling at me. You're waiting for me to mess up on it now. He's trying to get into my head here. He's trying to get into my head and make me mess up again like last time. It's not going to happen.
It's not me. It's you. It's all in your head.
Not going to happen, villain.
I was smiling because of the line that you always start us off with, Magnum Opus. I don't know why, but I always love it.
Oh man, I was reading something and I can't remember what it was. That somebody was saying that, I want to say it was Pet Sematary. I was reading some stuff on that after I finished it. I think somebody was like, "Oh, I think that Pet Sematary is actually King's Magnum Opus," and I'm just like, "What?" Like, I mean, I guess if you're not like counting like width and breadth of like the size of the work, if you want to like argue that it's like emotionally whatever you want to like, but like to me it's like not even close. Like if we Magnum Opus top 10 list, I don't know where Pet Sematary would even, if it would even make that list.
It'd be really hard to see where everyone would rank Pet Sematary, but for me, I mean, it's just like someone's like, yeah, Pet Sematary, it's the Magnum Opus. I'm just like, read it? Have you read The Stand?
I mean, because I feel like, I don't know, that's a whole different conversation, but I was just like, of all the ones to pick, like I would see people maybe saying like The Stand or It or something like Pet Sematary.
Even The Shining.
Yeah, and maybe The Shining, but like, wow, that one, it threw me off quite a bit, but I was like, okay, whatever, but of course it made me think of the line here to open the show, Magnum Opus, but so we're here for a I guess I can change the slide. It will be a book club for this episode. We have done a couple of roundtables and
lucky number 13.
Now we're back to it. Yeah, number 13 for drawing of the 3. And things are picking up here. Door 2 is closed and disappeared. And we're now dealing with a new character in on the beach here with our characters that we've been with here for a little bit now. So we'll go ahead and hit the intro stuff first of all. With spoilers, there's nothing to warn you about with this episode. We're only going to cover what we're covering and behind. We won't go forward in any way. So if you are not completely caught up with at least the 7 primary books, they're probably the episodes that are best for you to listen to. We're not going to talk about the end of the series. We're not going to talk about book 3 or book 4. So even if you're midway through book 5, you don't have to worry, and you don't want to worry about spoilers. This is maybe still where you want to go, even though we're kind of behind where you're at, because you'll be safe from any incoming spoiler bombs coming your direction. So these are the episodes to listen to on that. And next up, if you want to help us out a little bit, you can do that by subscribing and rating and reviewing our show on iTunes. Those kind of things definitely help people find the show, gives it more, I don't know, I guess visibility, I guess is the right word. I was blanking on the word there. And we definitely appreciate that, because the more people that find the show, the more people are part of our quartet. And I don't know, I just always feel like as we see like the chats full of people today, and I love it because it always adds to the discussion, whether it's through emails, through the chats, whatever. So
like our last roundtable was very robust with the chat.
Yeah,
it was very robust. It was a lot of fun.
Indeed. And next up, if you want to find like any of our information, like old shows or show notes, you can find that at darktowerpalaver.com. We don't really do show notes really for the book club episodes. There's really not a whole lot to put up in terms of like there's no show notes really. We're just literally going through the book word by word. So with these episodes, not as much, but if you want to find like older posts, older show notes, stuff like that. Also, if you're a new listener, we have a post for new listeners that it kind of gives you some questions. You don't have to answer them all, but if you want to like get some ideas of what to tell us as you introduce yourself in like an email, say, go ahead and click on that link on the darktowerpalaver.com. It's one of the top selections there, and you can find some questions to send in to us. It's kind of our way, kind of the ones we've refined over the first year of our existence as a podcast, refining like what questions really like root out what kind of Dark Tower fan you are. Like when did you come to the story? Did you have to wait for books? Like, all the kinds of stuff that kind of helps us calibrate like, okay, where as you as a reader of Dark Tower, how do you fit in? And I think it's a lot of fun. So check those out at the website. And as I've kind of alluded to, we have an extended content here, and that is everyone that listens and everyone that engages with the show. And as such, if you're listening as a new person, then you are now part of that extended content. And as such, we want to hear from you in any number of ways that Peter can tell you about.
Like Tad said, the best way to reach us is through email. It's darktowerpalaver@gmail.com. One thing that we were starting to talk about a little bit more is that if you want to email about the book clubs, we're more than willing to do discussions up until where we are. If you want to discuss what we talked about last episode, or we're coming up on something where you've always had a question or you've always wanted to talk, and we know that we have fans out there that don't have an extended content to talk to outside of the Palaver here.
Yeah.
So feel free, send us in and say, hey, when we get to this part of Drawing of the Three where this happens and this happens, I've always had this question. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
We have no problem with that. What we ask you to do is in the email subject line or at the very beginning of the email, let Tad know, because he goes through and reads all those first before reading them on the show, that it's for book club only.
Yeah.
We're going to have, most all of our emails so far have been for Roundtable. I really don't think we've had.
I think we've had maybe one or two that were book club that I remember.
They were book club, but we're more than okay with more. I mean,
yeah.
It's part of the reason why we're doing the book clubs this way and everything. So again, that email address, darktowerpalaver@gmail.com. We have a Facebook group. It's facebook.com/darktowerpalaver. We're also on the Twitter. It's @darktowerpod. That's @darktowerpod. We stream all of our shows on YouTube. It's youtube.com/darktowerpalaver. That's what Tad means when he says, that's what we have in the chat right now, is people are on YouTube right now with us with the show.
Listening live.
The book clubs do not stay up due to copyright issues of the sound clips. They stream live, but we don't keep them up just because they're just going to get taken down by YouTube anyways.
Yep.
But the roundtables stay up. So if you want to go baback and check out old roundtables with the visuals part of the show.
Yeah, like instead of going like the show notes, if you wanted to just like, you're like at your computer and you want to like, or your phone, I guess,
even that,
whatever you want to do. Basically, with the live streams, you're basically going to see exactly what Peter's seeing on the screen. Like for an episode like a book club, it's usually just the cover of the book and like a title card. But as we get into like roundtables, we do cover like news stories or visuals or pictures or whatever. We show those, and you can kind of watch them and see it real time. So. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Now, I got one thing I wanted to throw out. It's kind of abnormal for a book club, but something that I came to while reading book one, as a matter of fact. Okay. And I threw it out on social media, and I got a little bit. I think I've got enough, but I just want to throw it out on the show too, just in case there's people that aren't engaging via social media.
Yeah.
Basically, I was at the town of Tull, and there was a character there that, everyone loves, named Sylvia Pittston, right? And I thought to myself, who is the most reprehensible character in the Dark Tower series? And I thought to myself, I don't want it to just be like Flag Roland, getting into our debates and stuff from the round tables, but just ones that it puts you off when you get to that character in the book. Like there's something about them, whether it's their physical appearance, the way they act, just something about them that drives you crazy. And so I threw that out there. I've got a number of answers off Facebook and Twitter. I thought you might see it, but then I remembered like only recently. I'm like, oh yeah, Peter was going to kind of back off Facebook just a tiny bit. So I just want to throw it out there for everyone.
Yeah.
Just engage with us however you want to let us know who those characters are for you. And then what I'm going to do is create a bracket for said characters. And then we're going to go through and vote them round by round until we crown the most deplorable character in the Dark Tower series.
Okay, so I want you to explain exactly what you mean by deplorable. You're talking just like emotional reaction that you hate this character.
Yeah, I mean to start to build the bracket out. It'd first just be like for instance, like when you get to tall like Sylvia Pittston, I don't know that anyone enjoys her presence in that whole exchange. Like you've got Nort, you've got Al, you got different characters. You got even the guy that in the horse keeper, right? Like you've got people that aren't even necessarily great people, but they don't really like drive you crazy necessarily, or like, you know, whatever. Like, or even like when you're going on rereads and you know that a character's upcoming, and it just kind of makes you like, it gives you even a slight pit in your stomach. Or like, oh god, I'm getting up to this character. Like I think of like book 3, which I'm not going to talk about now because we're in a book club.
Right.
But like in book 3, there's a character. There's a character that and I just that's the kind of idea that I'm thinking about with how to populate it. And then what we'll do is I'll build a bracket on it because it is March after all.
Right.
And then we'll have a vote on our social media and whittle them away until we have the most reprehensible character.
Okay.
So I wanted to throw it out on the show.
Just to make sure I understood you correctly, you're not putting Flag in this bracket.
I mean, people can put him up, but I didn't want him put up just because, like, he's Flag. You know, like, yeah, like, I wanted it to be more like, you know, it's someone that, like I think of, like, we've talked about, like, The Mist, for instance. Like, if that were part of the Dark Tower series, there's a character there that you would, like, that kind of thing. Yeah. I feel like you have those throughout the Dark Tower series, maybe not to the same level of extreme as The Mist, but there's some characters where you're just like, I fucking hate this person. I hate this character. I hate, you know, and so that's kind of...
And you do too.
Yeah.
That's the great thing about it is that the ones that I have aren't the same ones that you have.
Yeah.
There's different characters where you're just like, yeah, God, I hate this person.
Yeah. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be like a full-on, you have to give me an essay as to why. I just wanted to at least carve off the edges of, like, turning into like the Flag or Roland debates that you and I have had. I don't want it to necessarily just be based on that. I want it to be based on, like, you know, you genuinely don't enjoy, like, and not even like, it's almost like you'd give props to King for creating a character that is so deplorable in some ways.
It's
you know
like,
what I mean?
It's like if I ever met the kid that played Joffrey, I'm going to walk up and just say, thank you so much for creating a character that I absolutely loved. Like, you're the best. I love you.
Agamorphy in the chat saying where to nominate the characters. I've done it on Twitter and Facebook. There's a post on Facebook, Twitter. There's a tweet. I didn't pin it. I should pin it. But if you're not involved in those, I think even maybe here in the chat, if you're here, I could take them down, or maybe Peter can while we're recording. And then we can add those to the list. I was hoping to get at least 8, but you know, if we end up getting a lot, we can make it a 16 thing bracket, and just kind of go through. The polls will be on social media though, because I don't really have any other way to like do voting like outside of Twitter or Facebook. Although I don't know when it comes to Twitter, I know Facebook you probably have to be signed on, but I wonder with Twitter if like you got a link to a tweet that had a poll, are you able to vote on it, I wonder, without being on Twitter?
I have.
Does it let you then?
Yeah, someone pinned a Twitter poll to Facebook.
Okay.
And I voted on it on accident.
Okay.
So I don't even know like that it was Twitter. And I remember I deleted all my Twitters.
Oh yeah. So we got a couple people mentioning some names in the chat. I'm not
Quiet you, Chris.
No, I'm not going to mention them, but no, we got some good ones in here, and we got some ones that I have seen, but it's good to see them again because, you know, if I see one 15 times, it'll be a very good indication that that's a very hated character. So yeah, that's awesome. Thank you guys in the chat.
I got the 3 that have been in the chat so far because all 3 of those are actually on my list.
Yeah. I was about to say, I think I think it's gonna, I almost feel like I know who's gonna be on the list. There's been a few that have surprised me, but like, I think overall this is gonna be a really fun thing. So keep your eyes on the social media. I'll probably try to get that started before this weekend's over. I'll get the poll, like get the bracket made. I'll share it on our social medias. I'll put it on the website as well. I wonder about a poll on the website actually, for the people that aren't on social media. I'll look into what plugins I need to get for my for the website and to throw up a poll on there too. Maybe we'll even do the poll on the website just as a central thing, so I don't have to sit there and do math. and add up 3 different polls together. I'll just do it on the website and then link it on Twitter and on Facebook to allow people. I'll look into it, but for sure I want to get that going soon because obviously March Madness bracketing thing. And of course there is part of me that thought to myself after I came up with this idea that maybe it would be interesting to do a good guy version of this. Like, what characters do you love? But of course, me being me, let's start with the ones that drive us nuts first. And then maybe after this poll resolves itself, we'll go to favorite characters, which would be interesting in a different way, I think. But I don't know.
It's going to be so interesting seeing that come down.
So, sorry, that's a little bit of a tangent, which we don't actually get in book clubs as often.
Nope.
Because of our hands being tied with spoilers. We don't get as many tangents.
And we had to dance around it here because there's characters being mentioned from future books. So it's like, yeah. But we want everyone included in this. That's the big thing. It's like, Ted, I think did you text me about this or did you?
No, I think I meant to message you and say, hey, check Facebook. I posted something.
I think you did.
But
because this is familiar. This isn't something new for me.
Okay, maybe I did remember to tell you that.
Yeah.
See, I forgot if I remembered to tell you.
Tad's memory again. He was saying it before we started recording. His memory is horrible.
Yeah, indeed.
By the way, I'm Peter. This is Peter over here. You've only known me for like 20 years,
what?
But my name's Peter.
What did I say?
I'm just kidding. I just don't want you to forget.
Okay. It's like, did I call you the wrong name or something? All right, so yeah, a little bit of a tangent on our book clubs, which is, I don't know if it's a first, but it's certainly unique in these shows versus the round tables. But yeah, go ahead and keep those things coming via social media, whatever, and we will. I'll get that poll set up. Like I said, before the weekend's over. It's like Saturday afternoon. By Monday morning, we'll have the first round of polling going, and I'll share that across social media. I'll get it figured out. So, but now on to drawing of the 3. We are in subchapter 3 of chapter 3.
Yeah, because we were just talking about where we read to.
Yeah, so chapter 3, subchapter 3 is where we're starting off from where we left off. So we now have Suzanne, or we have Odetta on the other side of the door. And obviously this one was a different one than Eddie's. Like I was thinking about that as I was doing the rehashing here. Cause like, again, I'm reading the actual book for the first time, or not for the first time in a long time, for a couple of years almost, since I've done a Dark Tower read through in a traditional fashion. And I was like just starting the Eddie stuff, and I'm just like, this is a good chunk of the book. Whereas door number 2 is really not. Like, you kind of get in and out of that door very quickly.
Boom.
And we're out of the door now, but obviously the repercussions of that are what we're going to deal with as we go on here. So what do you got first in subchapter 3, sir?
So basically there's the first part where Roland and Eddie exchange a look about how they're confused. But over on for me, it's the next page. It's the gunslinger glanced at him, meaning, and Eddie was able to read his eyes easily enough. Can't you see she's in sock? I know what you mean, Roland, old buddy, but it's only washes up to a point. I felt a little shocked myself when you came busting into my head like Walter Payton on crack, but it didn't wipe out my memory bank. Because the big thing here for her, talk about Odetta, is that she doesn't remember where Roland took her from. She was not there. She says her last memory was being at home.
Yeah.
Which, of course, we learned last time. She was at Macy's.
Yeah.
Stealing stuff.
Yeah, indeed.
And that's where she says that she has no memory of that.
Yeah, indeed. I wanted to mention in the first part of subchapter 3, a little bit before yours, the Krista McAuliffe reference. Did you pick up on that? That was a little bit before your my time.
That I don't know who that is.
Okay. That's the teacher astronaut in the space shuttle that exploded in the 80s.
Oh, in
the teacher.
Oh, what was it? Columbia?
Was it?
There's two that blew up,
and they're both C names: Columbia and Challenger. I always forget which is which.
Is it Columbia or Columbus?
I think Challenger is probably the earlier
Challenger's
one.
the earliest.
You know what's funny? Growing up, I actually had a picture of the astronaut crew
because there was the one
on my wall.
What was the one that blew up when we were in high school?
I think that was the Columbia. I think
because I remember where I was when that one happened.
Yeah, and
because I was in one of those electronics department stores.
Yeah,
that has like the wall of TVs, and it was like on the news, and it's like space shuttle blows up on, because that was the one that blew up on reentry.
Yeah,
there was something wrong with the heat panels on the bottom of the space shuttle.
Yeah,
and the
I think
Challenger was the one that blew up
in the
taking
80s.
off.
Yeah, taking off.
Because that was something with like a gasket or something.
Yeah, an O-ring.
O-ring, that's what it was.
Yeah, and I want to say with that one, they were basically trying to get kids reintroduced just because they had kind of grown bored of space travel.
She was a teacher, right?
So
is what you said.
Yeah, so she was the teacher. Yeah, so that's who. Okay, so Challenger is the one that killed McAuliffe. Yeah, so I found it interesting because like for me, as I'm reading it, I tend to just like gloss over that. But here is we're like going a little bit deeper and like stopping like Kristen McAuliffe. I'm like, wait a minute, that name sounds, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's the because like, and then also I was watching a documentary on, cause Netflix has the documentaries now on the decades, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. And I've been watching through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s one kind of concurrently, and so that one was like, it jogged my memory quicker of like, oh, that's who that was. And yeah, I remember growing up, I had a picture, like their crew picture with like the flags on the sides and stuff. For some weird reason, I had that up on my wall. Like I was never that crazily big into space travel, that was before my time that shuttle happened. But it is still a weird thing that I just happen to have.
Yeah, I know it blew up in the 80s, but we were born, but we were just like kids.
Yeah, we would have been,
right?
Yeah,
like
we would have been.
Two?
Yeah, we would have been before we were even in school or anything. Because like Reagan was president. Reagan was out of his presidency by was it 88, right, or 89? So
wasn't it 90? 90, 94
no,
for Clinton?
That's Bush. Is 88 to 90.
No, that's what I mean. It wasn't it 90 when Clinton took over, wasn't it?
92.
92. Okay.
Yeah, so 88.
So it would have been 88.
So,
Yeah,
so around somewhere in the 87, somewhere around. Somebody that was more of that generation might be able to recall it quicker. But either way, we were children. We were nowhere near school age or age enough to like be like whatever. But it is one that like, yeah, as I read that, he says, what is his line here? Shocked all the way to the back of her living room before she left Macy's. You tell me the last thing she remembers sitting in a bathrobe, listening to some blow-dried dude talk about how they found the Gonzo down in Florida Keys with Christopher McAuliffe's left hand mounted on his den next to his prize marlin. So, and then of course, I love this just again as the whole time travel, time displacement, whatever thing is more days than ever. The lady says, who is Krista McAuliffe? Is she one of the missing Freedom Riders? And of course he's like, what are the Freedom Riders? I just love that. Cause again, you're taking people from different generations here, like for him, that would have been, well, I guess, yeah, you're talking, it would have been, he's in 87. So it's at least before that. Right. That narrows it even more than,
well, that's right.
So so it was a big deal. I want to say it was probably 86 or 87, somewhere in that realm. So yeah, we were like one or two.
Yeah, and both of us born in the fall of 85. So
yeah, so it was. I just found it an interesting reference, and one that I don't know that honestly until this, I don't know that that's ever clicked in my mind that was like. Because again, I think as I've like read it in the past, I just like went over the name and just kept going. Like, okay, cool, whatever. And then or listening, I just listen and let it goes in one ear and out the other. And in some ways, it's just like, okay, cool, a reference. But like here, doing this more in depth, I'm like, wait, Chris McAuliffe, and then like it gave me just the couple seconds it took to like stop my mind to go, who is that? And then like, oh yeah, I know who that is. So
accessing databanks.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Agamorphy says, yeah, we were all watching on TV during school. Yeah, because that was like the big push because kids were just not into it anymore, and they wanted to get the revitalized like interest of kids because I don't know, like they've it's not good necessarily to not be popular in terms of like when you're a company that or a organization that's basing itself on tax dollars, right? Like the more popular you are, the better chance you have of getting funding and whatnot. So
good show that highlights that for NASA as The Martian. Recently just watched that, and they talk about how like their funding is public and they can't hide anything because everything is public knowledge and stuff like that. And that's obviously that's set in the future a little bit, but still it's basically how NASA works. Is that's why you're able to go look up like what the the Hubble telescope sees and what Curiosity, the rover on Mars, saw. Yeah, you're able to go access that because it's all public stuff. So
yeah, indeed. Okay, so what do you got next?
A little bit down the ways. So what about you?
Let's see. I got the next one I have is a little bit down here. It says, and Eddie caught a bare glimpse of the black woman in the wheelchair in the mirror to the left and remembered thinking, Jesus, he's got her all right, but she sure don't look happy about it. I found that interesting because he's kind of looking through the eyes of her that's looking through the mirror, seeing her own face. Yep. And he's seeing that it's definitely not not a nice face.
You actually took me to my next note. Is the next paragraph is that then the view pivoted and Eddie was looking at himself. The view rushed toward the viewer, and he wanted to put up the hand holding the knife to shield his eyes, because all at once the sensation of looking through two sets of eyes was too much, too crazy. It was going to drive him crazy if he didn't shut it out, but it all happened too fast for him to have time. So that's Eddie. This is where it gets crazy to think about this. This is why I wanted to highlight this. This is where Eddie, using his own eyes, looked through the doorway.
That's seen through her eyes.
That's seeing through her eyes, looking into it's not. Yeah, looking through her eyes. That's looking back through the doorway at him.
Yeah. So like,
and
I think to myself,
and he's seeing from her perspective, him looking back through the doorway.
And I think to myself, when you have a video camera, if you hook it up to a TV and then point it at itself, it goes all nuts.
Yeah,
it goes bonkers.
Right.
I can't help but think that like
what your brain does like that.
My brain would probably just start making the dial-up sound. As my mind just broke. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, no, I do think that's fine. Again, I'm a child of sci-fi. I love sci-fi, and this is the kind of stuff where it's like the best of sci-fi has cool stuff like this. But yeah, indeed. And then it's explaining here what's happening. The wheelchair came through the door. It was a tight fit. Eddie heard the hubs squeal on the sides. At the same moment, he heard another sound, a thick tearing sound that made him think of some word, placental, it says in parentheses, that he couldn't quite think of because he didn't know that he knew it. Then the woman was rolling towards him on the hard-packed sand, and she no longer looked mad as hell, hardly looked like the woman Eddie had glimpsed in the mirror at all, for that matter, but he supposed that wasn't surprising. When all at once you went from the changing room at Macy's to the seashore of a godforsaken world where some of the lobsters were the size of collie dogs, it left you feeling a bit winded. That was a subject on which Eddie Dink felt he could personally give testimony.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So that's that's a good one. And now we obviously, as the reading audience, are privy more to what's going on here than Eddie is. We know that there is two characters involved here. We've got Detta and we've got Odetta. And basically what we know that he doesn't is that he saw Detta's face going through the mirror, or in the mirror, before that she came through, and then while coming through the door, that paradigm shifted, and now Odetta's on the other side. Yep. So we know that, but he has no way of knowing that. So that's kind of one of those interesting things that, like, when an audience knows more than a character, I always find that interesting. But that's where we're at. We kind of know what's going on. Kind of like you mentioned earlier, there's a time lapse involved here that she's not fully going to understand.
Yeah.
And that's all part of why we know why, but she doesn't know, Eddie doesn't know, Roland doesn't know. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting dichotomy that exactly start here.
And then, like, right after that, it talks about the doorway disappearing, which is what you brought up a little bit ago. Behind her, the doorway had already disappeared, and it's a question mark. I don't know why, but that's what I really like. Disappeared? That was not quite right. It seemed to fold in on itself like a piece of film running backward. This began to happen just as the store Dick came slamming through the other, more mundane door, the one between the store and the dressing room. He was coming hard, expecting the shoplifter would have locked the door, and Eddie thought he was going to take one hell of a splat against the far wall. But Eddie was never going to see it happen or not happen. Before the shrinking space where the door between the world and this disappeared entirely, Eddie saw everything on that side freeze solid. The movie had become a still photograph. All that remained now were the dual tracks of the wheelchair, starting in the sandy nowhere and running 4 feet to where it and its occupant now sat. I don't know why, but I've totally missed that on all my other read-throughs, is that the guard bursting through froze.
Yeah.
And just cinematically in my head, I picture that, and like you said, you're a fan of sci-fi. If I say something folding in on itself, I'm sure 15 different images pop into your head of things folding in, where there's all of a sudden that flash of light at the end where it's it's gone.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I love the image of the wheelchair wheels starting and just stopping.
Yeah,
where she's sitting out of nothing.
It reminds
in the middle of a beach.
It reminds me of Back to the Future.
With the tire tracks.
With the tire tracks. Yeah. That's exactly what I think of when I read that, is Back to the Future, indeed. Yeah, so again, I know I nerd out on it again, being like a sci-fi fan, but like kind of the mechanics of it all. We talked about it a lot early on when we were dealing with Roland and Eddie's head, but now we're dealing with a whole different aspect because this is acting differently than Eddie's door did.
Well, we got a third perspective is what we got. Before we had Roland's perspective inside Eddie's head and Eddie reacting to someone being in his head.
Yeah.
But now we have someone not in the subject's head and not Roland.
Yeah.
We have an observer watching through the door, which is what I just highlighted, not in this note, but the one previous, was what Eddie saw when the door shifted and looked at him.
Yeah.
Which, I can't imagine how that would feel.
Yeah, that'd be a bizarre feeling. Now with Eddie's door though, that one was just closed and then it just kind of like became devoid of any kind of like connection, right?
Life, yeah.
And life, it just kind of falls down or whatever, if I recall. Or
I think it ceases to exist as well.
Does it? I was thinking that it kind of just like closed click or whatever, and this one was a little bit different. Again, it's one of those memory things that, and also, I don't know about you, but there's times like I'll get an image in my mind, and like that image is hard to like get out of my mind, and sometimes it takes like being corrected. I mean, it's happened before on the show where like somebody will correct me. Oh, you said this, but it's actually this. Like there's times like, oh yeah, you're absolutely right, and I've absolutely read that. Like God knows how many times, and it's just like for some weird reason, the first image that ever came in my head is one that stayed in my head, even though like the words are telling me differently. If that makes any sense. Like for me, sometimes it's not like massive things. Obviously, I'm not like rewriting the books necessarily in my head, but it is one of those things where like maybe what I'm seeing versus what is being described is different, especially because we've talked about before. I'm more one that like tends to like focus on the dialogue more than the descriptors.
No, yeah. I just quickly looked back while you were talking just to be sure. It actually doesn't cover what happens to the door. It just says that Roland closes it. That's
okay.
It. That's
yeah.
It.
So I guess it is just filling it in, kind of.
Well, it's actually a little bit different scenario because Roland closes that door. Technically, that door hadn't run out of time. Is kind of how I'm looking at it now. But it seems like Data's did because the door was still open when it froze. Like it became like Eddie describes it, going from being a film to being a photograph.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting to see like the different mechanics of it's like, okay, we need to stop this before, because think about it. If the guard comes pummeling through that door and keeps running, all of a sudden we have an Andolini on the beach, number 2.
Now here's the question. Yeah. I guess kind of what my thought process was going down this slightly rabbit trail, but it is part of what we're talking about, so it's not necessarily a tangent or anything. Is the door acting the way it's acting because the door belongs to Data, and once Odetta took over, the door no longer functions, and it's actually like malfunctioning in a way? And then it comes to the larger question of, would that door almost not work until Data was in charge and not Odetta? Like, is there some kind of connection here? And I've never thought about this before. Even just like, it's like one of those weird things that's like, because with Eddie, it's always Eddie, right? Like there's no question involved, like whatever. But here you're technically dealing with two different, like personalities, right? So the question being is like, is this door being called out as acting so much different because the door is connected to Data, and as they're crossing through, there's a change happening, and that's why this door goes nuts and freezes and everything else. Yeah. Like versus like with Eddie's, like it just closes. Once you close it, he's on the other side. Like, yeah, and why did it work that way for Eddie too? Who knows? Like, I think some of that's like whatever, but it's certainly acting differently than Eddie's door did at the end.
I wonder if it's not Data that has control of it. I wonder if it's Roland, because all of these 3 of these doors are foretold in the fortune for Roland.
Yeah,
is for him to draw his group through his quartet and everything, and that's where it comes through, is that maybe it's where Roland has that control, because obviously Roland coming through in the wheelchair with her is instantly going to get transported back to his body and everything like that. So maybe it's him, not her.
Yeah. It was just an interesting thought for me, because like because you do have this very distinct difference of how these doors stop, I guess, and it just makes me wonder, like with this case, it's a very unique case because you have both characters that maybe there was some kind of connection with it with Data, and I don't know. It's an interesting thought, and interesting to think about like how the mechanics of it work beyond like, obviously as Agamorphe says in the chat here, basically divine intervention, ultimately. Which, yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think that like there's some supernatural elements involved here, you know, and like, yeah,
well, here's where it gets a little bit crazy if you start bringing in the Gan aspect of it. Is that okay? So Roland chased down Flag, who's the bad guy as far as we can tell, who tells him about the doors and the tower. But so the bad guy tells the good guy about the doors and that Gan has control of. So it's just like kind of like,
yeah,
wait, hold on a second. Like, wait, how does this work? So it's never something that's ever, it's honestly never crossed my mind before, is the doors working and who controls them and everything like that. Because,
well, to me, it's not even a control aspect as much as it is for me, like, almost like a battery, right? Something's driving the door.
Right.
And like, not necessarily that it controls, because I don't think it's like a cognitive like control, but is it an element of like it's connected to Detta because maybe it's even just the randomness of she happened to be Detta when the door was opened. But then as they're coming through to have that change happen, that kind of like almost shorts the door out a little bit, and that's why you see the freezing, and that's why you see it just completely fold in on itself. Versus Eddie's, it's just like close, done. It's over.
It could be, or it could be based off of the will of Roland for it to be done. It's the drawing of the three.
Yeah.
So maybe it's the fact that when Roland brings Eddie over the first time, and I think there's only 2 times that Eddie crosses the door before he comes the final time.
Yeah.
So that third time is the final time, and that's where Roland shuts the door.
Yeah.
That's the drawing is what stops it. And since Roland was drawing Detta by force, that as soon as they crossed, that's it. It malfunctions at that point.
Yeah, I guess it could be either way, but it's interesting though.
No, it is. It definitely is to think about it.
Especially because we're dealing with like a book that would have been written. This is all in the same book, right?
Yeah.
We're not dealing with like Door 1 was written 15 years earlier or anything. Like we're dealing with like the same king at the same time period writing all this. So like, why is it different is just an interesting question to me is, why is it different? I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
It's interesting.
No, it is definitely interesting. And this is one of the great things about us coming back through and going through it. I think you brought this up last episode or the episode before on book clubs, is that when we get to go through this way, that's where we're going to notice things and be able to talk about things a little bit more in depth. That normally this would never be a subject for a roundtable.
Yeah, the mechanics of the door number 2 closing
would never be a subject for a roundtable.
Unless somebody emailed us, it would never come up.
No, and that's exactly it. And that's the great thing about these roundtables is for things like this. And this is exactly what we're talking about, guys in the chat and people listening on the podcast, is that this is what we're looking for. Is this is the kind of things that we're more than happy to talk about, these tangents.
Yeah, minutia doesn't scare us.
Dude, it's so fascinating when you get into some of these aspects of this series.
For us, it is. Hopefully, it is for everyone else.
Yeah, hopefully too. Yeah, it's just something that like we like to talk about, because one of the other things that I love with Dark Tower Palaver is that I get other people's perspectives, and a lot of times it's so much better than what my stupid brain came up with.
Yeah,
like their Agamorphes talking about Gan never crossed my mind.
Yeah.
Not once did I ever consider that it's divine intervention that was passed down, and it's kind of like, like destiny for Roland that he's going to get X, Y, and Z from these doors, and once that happens, it's going to step in and it's going to take care of it for him so that something bad doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that. Never would have thought of it. And that's one of the great things about these book clubs, that we're going to be able to go through this for all of the books and be able to get all of that. And I'll tell you right now, I'm so excited because there's a lot of stuff that I'm probably just too dumb to pick up on.
Well, I think also, like, it does come in some aspects too. I think it comes with like just speed. Like with these, we're kind of going through like word by word systematically. Like, whereas like when you are reading or you're listening or whatever you're doing,
boom,
for pleasure, you're going through quick. Like it's all it's a matter of like, it's like, being the dad on a road trip where it's all about making time, like it's not that you're speeding through the books, but it's like you're going through, you're not sitting there contemplating like the smaller minutiae. It's just like, oh cool, Krista McAuliffe reference, whatever, door folds in, whatever. Like they're just things you just pass by. Like, okay, cool. That's just part of the scenery. You don't stop and take pictures of the scenery and talk about it as much. Like that's what we're doing here. Is like, this is like the guided tour where we stop at, some of these very minute things and talk about. Then, of course, we get wise-ass Eddie here. Well, I'll tell you one thing, Dorothy, Eddie said, you ain't in Kansas anymore. The woman's eyes brim with tears. Eddie could see her trying to hold them, but it was no good. She began sobbing. Good job, Eddie.
Wow.
Oh man. Now of course that is something to obviously to look at. Is it's very jarring. It's got to be very jarring for anyone to go through this, let alone her. That's like not right now. As now she's back as Odetta, she's not going to remember. Except for the night before being in bed watching the news, the 11 o'clock news. Like that's a huge jump for her to like go from that to this. Like that's a huge thing. Whereas like Eddie, he's just like, okay, cool, I'm in a plane. He has kind of a slower time to like deal with it as Roland's like engages him slowly and stuff. Like he kind of like dips his toe into the water and slowly goes in. Whereas like Odetta here is basically just like thrown in. Like
I was literally picturing two people picking her up and just into the pool.
Yeah, like they're like it's far more jarring perhaps because it is a lot less like it wasn't just like, 'cause remember Roland talks to Eddie at first, right? And then Eddie has to get through the idea of like not getting radio signals through his fillings, and like he's able to slowly kind of digress or digest the whole thing as it happens.
He's able to adapt. Is what it is. It's real easy to adapt when you're given time.
Yeah,
it's really hard when you're not.
Yeah, exactly. And then next little bit here, furious, and then in parentheses, in disgust with himself as well, Eddie turned on the gunslinger, who staggered to his feet. Roland moved, but not towards the weeping lady. Instead, he went to pick up his knife. Tell her, Eddie shouted. You brought her here, so go on and tell her, man. And after a moment, he added in a lower tone, and then tell me how come she doesn't remember herself. So, kind of Eddie kind of turning on Roland. It's easy to forget, especially with how we're going with this, that not long ago, Eddie was holding a knife to Roland's throat. This is kind of for him would have been a momentary thing here, but for us, it's obviously been a break for a few other episodes and stuff. But like, it may be easier to forget like where Eddie was situated, 3 minutes before this in terms of the story, right? So for him, this anger is it's all justified for me. Like it all makes sense that this would happen. What are you showing me? Oh, the picture.
The illustration is of Eddie straddling Roland with the knife to his throat. Here.
Yeah, indeed.
So it's real easy for me.
Yeah,
having the visuals.
Yeah, indeed. But yeah, no. So it's for this anger, like because it may seem out of place if you forget that. Oh yeah, not a few minutes ago he was basically screaming at Roland, telling him if he goes through the door he's going to kill him. Then he gets on him with the knife and everything. So yeah, it's as the scene plays out, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
So as we get into subchapter 4, what do you got, sir?
Roland has this interesting thought process here where he's talking about, and I love this first little bit. Roland did not respond, not at once. He pinched the hilt of the knife between the two remaining fingers of his right hand, transferred it carefully to his left, and slipped it into the scabbard at the side of one gun belt. The more I read, like I was talking about just a second ago, in depth and everything like that, losing those fingers would really suck. Even not being a gunslinger, losing the dominant hand, first two fingers, would suck really bad.
Yeah.
I look at what I've done just while recording this podcast. I've used it to hold my phone. I've used it to pick up my water bottle and take a drink. I'm using it currently to hold my book open. It's just like, that would suck really bad. On top of that, he has to deal with Eddie, who's pissed at him. He has to deal now with this woman who just come through, and that's where he gets in this paragraph here, is talking about her and the condition that he senses it.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. The whole hand thing is definitely a difficult one to deal with, as he's, he's making do as it is here. You can see him kind of stumbling with it and stuff. But even like the opposable thumb, like think about how much more like you've got with your first couple fingers in your opposable thumb versus like go to your other two. Like it's just less. Like, it's just there's just less involved.
There's nothing really that you can pick up with like your pinky, like barely able to pick up this pen.
Yeah.
But like picking up like my bookmark is like,
yeah, it's a challenge. Like
I look like someone who's come out of a coma and doesn't know how to use. But like if I use my first two fingers.
Yeah, because it's just like it's like a percentile almost. It's like you've lost 60% of your opposable thumb ability by losing those fingers. So yeah. Next up, we have what you kind of referenced here. Or let's see, is there something in the chat that I missed here? You were looking at your your phone there.
Someone asked a question. Agamorphy asked a question. Timeline from first knife attack to this point. Anyone?
First knife attack in terms of
I don't know. That's what someone asked.
Is like if we're talking like the attack for Eddie on Roland, I'd say it's like, well, I guess because you're in the door, you see. I'd say 5 minutes if we were talking that attack.
Because they watched her stealing.
Because she instantly like screams when he enters her mind. So like it doesn't leave time for like, like whereas like when he's in Eddie's mind, I'd say he might spend an hour or two. It could be a good chunk of time. But in door number 2, I'd say it's like 5 minutes tops. Like it doesn't, because like instantly there's so much going on that like.
Because so let's say this is that Eddie says that if he goes through, he'll cut his throat. And then Roland goes through, body collapses, Eddie gets on top of him, and then he looks up, and that's basically where he stops. And basically, so we have to count, and the kind of Agamorphy goes into it a little bit here in the chat, talking about...
She screams,
which gets the guard notices her,
yeah.
with her stealing, hands midway into the bag with stuff in it.
Yeah.
He comes after her, Roland takes over, dressing room, back to this world.
I'd say 5 minutes is even a long period of time. That could be 3 minutes. I mean, I feel like it's a short period of time. And I feel like that's maybe why Eddie is so hypnotized almost. Because it's all happening so fast, and then like for him also to be somewhat taken by the movement, right? Like whole steady cam thing. Like there's all that, like, because both of them are outside of the door looking in when they're first like thrown off by it, and like, oh well, what's going on here,
right?
And then like seeing her steal, oh, she's a thief. First you got a junkie, now you got a thief. But then once he enters, I feel like you're talking like probably 3 minutes in my mind, like for piecing it together. I mean, obviously as they're reading it, it feels like more because it's a chunk of text and stuff that we're going through. You got some descriptors, you got some other stuff, but I feel like, yeah, from Eddie's perspective, which is the best way to look at it, I feel like it's probably 3 minutes.
Yeah, and Mark asked the question, he's still got the knife to his throat when he comes through, doesn't he? Yes, because in last book club, that's where we basically wrapped up, is after she says like something like, young man, what are you going to do with that knife there? And then Roland's like, yes, what are you going to do? And that's where he throws the knife off to the side of Odetta and it sticks into the sand.
Yeah.
And that's where Roland just now went to go pick it up.
Yeah. So it's just, that is a quick turnaround. I mean, again, it's one of those things that like for me is like, even if I'm listening to it, which is like the quickest way to digest a book is like audiobook. I don't know that I ever would have thought without asking that, like a question like that. I don't know if I ever would have really thought about it, but yeah, as I think about it, dude, I'd say easily it's under 5 minutes, probably like I say 3 minutes is probably about like, what it would probably take, because again, he jumps right in, takes over really quick, and then just rolls up the aisle like without knowing, like,
right to the dressing room,
turn
through the door,
like maybe 3 is even long, so it's quick, like, and I feel like with Eddie, like that's why for him it's not even that he has a lot of time to like, because I guess the question could come up, what was Eddie's intentions? Would Eddie actually harm Roland? And potentially even in his anger, not even necessarily that like he's that dumb or whatever, because like, we talked about it in a previous episode, like how it pissed me off, but like not even that, but like maybe even just an element of like anger at the whole thing, maybe taking over and getting past his sense and the anger driving him.
Sure.
But it's like, I feel like he's somewhat hypnotized by what happens. It all happens so fast that it doesn't really lend him the time before Roland's back in his body.
And that's exactly what he gets into right here, is he talks about, I think it's on the next page where he talks about that he needs just another minute to think about it. And he doesn't get it because Eddie bursts out at him.
Yeah. Now, one other question. Sorry before you.
No, sure.
Does Roland hurry because of what he encounters, which we're about to talk about here? Or do you think he's hurrying because of the threat that Eddie poses? Is that potentially a reason that he goes quicker with her?
He doesn't. I don't think he wants her to be detained. I think that's solely his hurry. If he had come through, well, also I think that it kind of caught him off guard what type of person he's dealing with.
Yeah.
Because he brings it up a couple times. The type of person is, he says it right here. He had sensed only darkness in her. That was a mind entombed in a cave-in, except that in that moment they burst through the doorway and separated. He wished desperately that he could tarry a moment longer. One moment would have told so much, because the woman before them now wasn't the woman in whose mind he had been. Being in Eddie's mind had been like being in a room with jittery, sweating walls. Being in the ladies had been like laying naked in the dark while venomous snake crawled all over you. Until the end. She had changed at the end. There had been something else. Something he believed was vitally important, but he either could not understand it or remembered it. Something like, then in parentheses, a glance. The doorway itself, only in her mind. Something about, again in parentheses. You broke the four special, it was you. Some sudden burst of understanding as at studies when you finally saw, and that's where Eddie interrupts him and says, "Oh, fuck you."
Yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about is that
yeah.
Roland starts to get a finger on it, but he doesn't have enough time to digest, and that's what you're talking about here. Is how fast and everything like that. I think that when he goes in, sees what he's dealing with, he describes it as being naked, laying on, with venomous snakes crawling all over you. That feeling, I can tell you right now, that's probably what led to Roland taking over, and the fact that he had to fight her to take over.
Yeah, and
tooth and nail.
That's what Jack's saying. I think he hurried as a sense the other fighting him back,
right?
Which is definitely, certainly, potentially a question. I'm just saying, is there even any consideration of the fact that, like, if I linger, potentially Eddie can, click and do something, or do you think it's all the?
No, I think it's all in the situation. It's a reaction to the situation. Because if he had come in and he had been to Odetta, to where he could talk to her, to reason with her, where she was sitting at home watching the news, I don't think there would have ever been an instance where he would have had to rush. It would have never been. I think the biggest thing was he didn't want her to get detained.
Yeah.
Because if that happens, he's already saw it with Eddie, and he was doing that while sick.
Yeah.
And this is a little bit further in the chapter, and I hope we get to it, but basically, he's sick. He's still sick.
Yeah.
He's not wholly better yet, and that's where I think that plays a part in it. I think the large part is what Jack says, that he had to fight her. Not only did he have to fight her, but what he's fighting is not, strictly speaking, just a pissed off human. This is something way worse, is what he's describing it as.
Yeah.
And last thing he wants is for her to be detained.
Yeah. And I would say also, let's give Roland a little bit of a break. It's not like he's made a habit of getting in people's heads.
Oh,
I feel like there's going to be some element of like,
okay, learning.
He went through it with Eddie. I would assume that's his first time he's ever encountered this.
Yeah.
So like, I feel like maybe at times we take that for granted, the fact that Roland is not like, so like, okay, Eddie, that was a little bit more different. But now with this, it's just like, there's no way to prepare yourself. There's no way to know. So maybe, it's just like, I got to get out of this as quick as humanly possible. Let's, and she can't get caught, detained, like whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Like, let's get the F out of Dodge.
Yeah, I think how indifferent he was before he went in when Eddie was threatening it. I don't think that I would think that Roland's that worried about Eddie. I think he knows it's a bluff that Eddie wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
I think that's where he stands. I think once he gets in there, it's, oh shit, everything's on fire.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. It's that instant where you're like, okay, Tad, you have to run this obstacle course. We're going to take the blindfold off now. They take it off and you're in the middle of a fucking burning warehouse. You're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
That adrenaline spikes and you're just like, okay, I got to go.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then I love Eddie's second part of his line here. You're nothing but a goddamn machine. I mean, we've been learning a lot about Roland over the course of the book clubs, which I don't even know how long we've been doing book clubs now. But either way, as long as we've been doing them, I feel like we've been kind of learning about Roland, and that's certainly one that doesn't feel like it definitely feels like it fits. It doesn't feel out of place from what we've learned thus far from Roland. For Eddie to say that, I'd say it's definitely a good read from Eddie's perspective on Roland, as so far as we've seen him. Like, I'm not that far removed from seeing Jake plummet at Roland's hand, basically.
With the part that gets me from our book clubs, this is one of those things, again, is that Jake doesn't scream on the way down.
Yeah.
He accepted it and he just went quietly.
Yeah.
But that's a horrific way to die.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's things like that is like what I'm talking about when I'm pulling things from the book club. And this, again, here is like what you're talking about, calling him a goddamn machine.
Yeah.
That does call up some bad memories from just the first book.
Yeah, exactly.
Jake, I mean, how easy would you have it shooting a woman that you had been with for a week?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, with Tull, I mean, you can give an excuse of like that she's kind of part of the crowd or whatever, but yeah, I mean, even if you wanted to buy that, like, it doesn't exclude Jake, as being the
Jake,
big thing.
Allie, I mean, he talks about other things as well. I mean,
in
book one with flashbacks and stuff like that. It's just like, Eddie's got a point here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it definitely fits the like what is it, the psychological profile that they build for serial killers and stuff with the
Yeah.
FBI. Like if we're building a profile on Roland over the course of what we've read thus far, I'd say that's pretty spot on there from the junkie.
Come on, man.
Oh, I gotta slide him in there as much as I can. It's a little bit harder in these episodes to get the get the shot past the goalie right in, right through your rib cage into your heart there, but I still find the way.
Wow. Hashtag Tad is terrible.
Okay, so next up, where are we? She wept. I was sitting at home watching TV so I could hear if my friends got out of Oxford alive, and I'm now here, and I don't even know where here is. So again, this I think is the best way to clue. This is the way for King to clue us as the audience in fully if we haven't caught on to it yet, like where she's at. Like we know how the character works. Like you got two personalities that don't know each other exist. They both kind of have a blindness in a lot of ways to it. Right. And we've kind of known who was involved in the store and whatever. But now this is a way to fully clue us in that, this, from her perspective, what does that look like? That looks like she's sitting there watching TV at the 11 o'clock news. The next thing she knows, she's on a beach with no comprehension of the fact that the next day she left and went to Macy's and was stealing things. So,
and that's what Eddie was talking about earlier in this subchapter was how come she doesn't remember that?
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And who she is. And it goes on here, it says, well, neither do I, Eddie said, holding her tight, beginning to rock her a little, but I guess we're in it together. I'm from where you're from, little old New York City, and I've been through the same thing. Well, a little different, but same principle, and you're going to be just fine. As an afterthought, he added, as long as you like lobster. Oh, Eddie. What do you got next?
Actually, next paragraph. She hugged him and wept, and Eddie held her and rocked her, and Roland thought, Eddie will be all right now. His brother is dead, but he has someone else to take care of, so Eddie will be all right now. And that just kind of goes to show, like, what type of person Eddie is. I mean, Roland, like, we've talked about this, how cold and calculated. I mean, we just mentioned we were talking about the machine and Jake and everything that happened in book 1. But to see him still understand.
Yeah. And that's like, the thing is, like,
I
feel like Roland, like, I don't know. I feel like at times it's easy to just be like, Roland's uncaring and he is a machine. I don't know that he's uncaring. I think that he's just like, because I guess maybe uncaring, but he's not unknowing. It's not that he doesn't, like, I feel like he knows, what he needs to know. He just doesn't care, or whatever, which maybe that makes him worse. But I feel like this, like, whereas like with Eddie, like maybe I'm a little bit surprised, like, okay, cool. Eddie, you actually kind of understand Roland a little bit. Whereas this, like Roland knowing Eddie, like to me, I'm just like, yeah, of course, like Roland's gonna know. Yeah. He dissected it probably within the first few sentences of Eddie telling his story, which we went through a number of episodes back. Like, because it's one of those things where like once you've experienced it, same thing happens to us in real life, right? There's times where you meet someone and like there's just some aspects of their personality where you're just like, oh, this is that type of person. I've met people like this before. I don't even need to know more. I mean, and that may sound somewhat crass, but like, there's times where you could be like, not the full person, but I know at least the type of person this is. Yeah. And because I know what I can expect from them and that kind of thing. Like
it's interesting because I've actually had that experience with Tad before when we've met someone new, like me and him going out with a different group of friends than we normally do. And they introduce us to someone and it's like, it's kind of fascinating watching Tad be like that. Cause you are very much like Roland like that. Cause like there's times, dude, I'm Eddie to a T. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm very emotional. That's how I am.
You don't say.
You shut the hell up, bastard. But like it's fascinating to watch Tad because it'll be like when we worked together before, we would have meetings about like new people and stuff like that. And Tad's like, yeah, what you're gonna need to do with him is you're gonna need to show him and then make sure to remind him later because he seems like the forgetful type. It's like, how the fuck do you know that from talking with him for 5 minutes? Like, yeah, he's one of those types. And then sure enough, the next day you find out the guy will flat out admit to you, yeah, I'm the forgetful type. So it's like you turn around and there's Tad just like peeking around, just like, told you.
Yeah, it's just maybe it's not everyone. Maybe it's just I'm a freak or something. But it's just something that I feel like there's times, and again, I'm not using that to like excuse like the larger 3D personality that everyone has. But I feel like some people too are trying to be a certain kind of person, and because of that, they start to like trim off their 3D edges to like fit the mold of like what they want to be. And like if you understand what they're trying to be, you kind of understand them because like if nothing else, they're trying to put the facade of like I'm this person, I'm just like this, whatever. I don't know. It's so for me, like I'm not surprised with Roland. I feel like he's like, okay, once he started getting the sense from Eddie, it's like, okay, I know this kind of person. I've met one before that's like this, whatever it might be, and it allows him then to fully understand the rest of what Eddie had to say. He didn't need to say.
Sure.
I mean, he needed it for himself, but for Roland, he's just like, okay, I already know. I know you. I know.
Sure.
I know what you need, basically. And like, here it is. He's just like, okay, now Eddie has what he needs. His brother died not that long ago. Call it a few days, probably traveling on the beach.
Yeah.
From his perspective, it's only been a few days he lost his brother. Now he's got someone that needs him. And there are people like that. There's some people that need to be needed. And that's usually the kind that's usually the kind of people that always end up getting in relationships with like people that are like maybe a little bit more hopeless and like self-destructive and like because they need to be needed, so they tend to like gravitate towards people like that.
No, and Jack makes a very apt statement here. This is kind of what me and Ted have been saying, but in a more direct way. I felt Roland has emotion, but has a deeper control than most. Yeah, absolutely is hitting the nail on the head right there. Is that's Roland to a T. I mean, this whole next section here where he talks, it's right after what I just read. I'm just going to read this because it's a great insight into Roland with exactly what Jack's talking about. But he felt a pang, a deep reproach hurt in his heart. He was capable of shooting, with his left hand anyway, of killing, of going on and on, slamming with brutal relentlessness through the miles and years, even dimensions, it seemed, in search of the tower. He was capable of survival, sometimes even of protection. He had saved the boy Jake from a slow death at the way station and from sexual consumption by the Oracle at the foot of the mountain. But in the end, he had let Jake die. Nor had this been by accident. He had committed a conscious act of damnation. He watched the two of them. Watched Eddie hug her, assure her it was going to be all right. He could not have done that. And now the rue in his heart was joined by stealthy fear. If you, I want your opinion on this. I was looking at this and I had this notated down. This paragraph's here where it starts, if you have given up your heart for the tower. Is this Roland talking to himself?
I think so. Yeah, that's kind of how I interpreted it.
Yeah, and this is the part that I really wanted to get to. If you have given up your heart for the tower, Roland, you have already lost. A heartless creature is a loveless creature, and a loveless creature is a beast. To be a beast is perhaps bearable, although the man who has become one will surely pay hell's own price in the end. But what if you should gain your object? What if you should heartless actually storm the Dark Tower and win it? If there is naught but darkness in your heart, what could you do except degenerate from beast to monster? To gain one object as a beast would only be bitterly comic, like giving a magnifying glass to an elephant. But to gain one's object as a monster, to pay hell is one thing. But do you want to own it?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. I feel like that's almost one that can go into the whole, roundtable discussion of Flag and Roland and their natures, because I feel like that's a really interesting line. And it's funny because like Kindle gives you the things there. That first sentence: if you have given up your heart for the tower, Roland, you've already lost it. A heartless creature is a loveless creature, and a loveless creature is a beast. That aspect. That's been highlighted 913 times. I don't know if you how often you use Kindle, but it tells you like if there's one that like a bunch of freaking people highlight the same line, it'll tell you that. And so yeah, that's one that 913 people have highlighted, just that first sentence, which I find is interesting because it's a really good and profound statement in a lot of ways. But yeah, the whole of it here is really good, and I feel like it's interesting because I feel like I see this as like internal dialogue kind of thing.
It does seem it more than now that I've read it out loud. And then like this is the part that I was talking about for Jack. He thought of Allie and of the girl who had I also wanted to ask you right here, is this the same in your version on the Kindle as it is for mine? He thought of Allie and of the girl who had once waited for him at the window.
Yeah.
Okay. The thought of the tears he had shed over Cuthbert's lifeless corpse. Oh, that he had loved. Yes, then. I do want to love, he cried. But although Eddie was also crying a little now with the woman in the wheelchair, the gunslinger's eyes remained as dry as the desert he had crossed to reach the sunless sea.
Yeah, indeed. And yeah, Agamorph says King's getting Nietzschean there, which is definitely and it is, but it's interesting because I feel like it fits really well with the character of what we've seen with Roland so far. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's one that like to highlight and keep for later discussions because I feel like even book club wise, as we get further in, I feel like that's like a foundational thing there. To know that that's in Roland's mind at this point might be interesting later, and yeah, it's a good one. I definitely have it highlighted here. Yeah, so we'll go on to subchapter number 5. And now with I don't know, did you have more I guess on that? I didn't want to skip that.
No. That's
just
basically
kind of the like almost him like his almost I don't know. I don't want to say struggling for his soul, but like it almost feels like it a little bit. But then at the end, that last bit, his eyes is as dry as the desert that he had crossed. Just like kind of gives you the idea that like, okay, he has these thoughts. He almost has like this internal emotional thing going on, but then he's still just.
He wants it's very interesting. It's kind of like me when it comes to like, yeah, I want to exercise and I want to get in shape as I eat my 15th piece of extra large pizza. Like it's that kind of thing. It's like, okay, you want to love and you want to express your love and everything like that. Okay, well, here's your opportunity.
Yeah.
But yet your eyes remain dry. Like that's the thing for me. Is like it's very interesting to look at that kind of scenario for Roland going forward. And then it's part of it is like, can Roland love or is Roland just locked down like Jack says?
Well, here's the thing that I find interesting is we talked about it earlier when Roland looked through Eddie's eyes and saw people on the airplane, and he talked about how soft and pathetic everyone was that he saw.
Right.
And we kind of talked about how like he can't be that way. You can't be that way in Roland's world or you die. You have to be hard. Is this the other side of that coin? Emotionally, Roland wants to be like Eddie, but Roland with the emotion of Eddie would be dead potentially long ago.
Oh yeah,
long before they ever get to this point.
Well, I mean, we already
you can't have that heart. I mean, think about if he had Eddie's heart in the first book, Allie, let alone or Jake.
Yeah,
I mean, what if Jake had died in a different fashion? Like it would have been the end of him.
I don't think he would have even got to Jake if he has Eddie's heart and Eddie's reactions and emotions and stuff like that. He couldn't have got past Tull.
Yeah,
not a chance.
Yeah.
Because he would have been doing everything he could to save Allie, which would have cost him in the Battle of Tull.
Yeah.
There was no way out of that except through them.
Yeah, and even if it was a thing where like he finally got to that moment where he knew he had to like kill them all, he would have delayed long enough because of his heart.
That's what I mean.
That it probably would have cost him. So it's just one of those things that was like, as much as it is, to look at like, Roland wants to be a certain way, it doesn't mean that Roland can be that way because kind of again, like we talked about, like he saw the people on the airplane and saw it's like a physical thing. Like they don't have any daggers, they don't have any knives, they don't have any protection, they're not wearing armor, like, and they're all fat and like he's just
right.
like they're just whatever. It's what it is, and we have it in the real world too. People living in certain areas are going to be a certain way because of the nature of where they live. Like
it's something that is said about us Americans, is that if we had to go and live in like some of the parts of like India, is one of the places that I've been doing not research, but I've read a couple articles recently just about some of the like struggles that just like the overpopulation of India that's causing and forcing on people.
Yeah.
Or
even like go back or even go back a few hundred years, like somebody living on the Old West versus someone that was like on the in New York. Like those are two different kinds of people. And they can't, like, I don't know. One has to be a certain way, or even like somebody coming to America hundreds of years ago, right when it's colonial. Like you had to have a certain grit to you to come over here and risk your life, your family's life, because it was dangerous.
Some of the people wouldn't even make the voyage.
Yeah.
It was just too much for them to be at sea for weeks on end.
Yeah, and that's why I love history, because it's like you get such extremes and you're not even that far back. You're only talking a couple hundred years and you've got a whole different. But yeah, it's interesting for me to look at when it comes to Roland, because I feel like that gives us two sides of the coin now. So Roland's physically, a certain way, but also emotionally, and maybe it's all kind of what he has to be. And to a point, is that what Court did to him? Like is that what was that Court's job? Not just to build him as a physical being, but to prepare him emotionally. And not that saying that Court was all of it, but I'm just saying we've seen Court training him in book 1 and some flashbacks. Mm-hmm. It's like, was that also part of Court's training? Like, not just like you can do 300 push-ups, but like, you need to
be able to kill without feeling.
Yeah. I don't know. It's an interesting thing, and it's kind of funny because it's just like right here, like in the middle of like what feels like more Eddie and Odetta central stuff.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't feel like you're diving as deep for Roland here. It's more of just him looking, going, oh, it's look at them, they're hugging, and like Eddie's gonna be okay, and like then suddenly King just drops this little nugget where it's like, oh, here, let me unravel some emotional.
Also, by the way, here's
Yeah.
how Roland is emotionally and psychologically damaged. You know,
and
damaged. I mean, that's even debatable. It's like like what you brought
or
up.
is it by design
for his world? Is this something that has to happen for him to be able to survive?
Yeah.
If that's the case, here's a daunting thought for you: is that going to be able to transition to Eddie and Odetta here?
Yeah. To
Are
survive
they going to be able to adapt to that?
Yeah. Exactly. It's interesting. And like, I don't know. It's I find it funny too, because especially just again coming off of reading book 1, this is kind of the thing that we didn't get as much in book 1.
Yeah.
Like we got a lot of Roland and we got some flashbacks and some stuff that was like important, but like it all felt so cold and so emotionless.
Yeah.
Like even just telling the story of like the trial of manhood that he tells to Jake toward the end of book 1, like it's like, okay, it's there's a lot of emotion in the story, but every aspect when you like pull back and you're hearing Roland's voice tell it, it's just cold. It's not at all emotional. There's no and this is like where maybe a different king that's a little bit more seasoned is like, hey, even though Roland is kind of this bastard, like I got to give him like a little bit more emotional depth a little bit than I did in the first book, or
right.
When I was 19 years old writing short stories for a magazine. So yeah, either way, we can jump into subchapter 5 now.
I have the whole thing highlighted.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's not even that long.
No, it's not.
five was just at the very, very end of like the page for me, so I had to change the page to see.
It's a.
Well, go on. Go on.
He would answer Eddie's question later. He would do that because he thought Eddie would do well to be on guard. The reason she didn't remember was simple. She wasn't one woman, but two, and one of them was dangerous.
Yeah, indeed. And that is definitely one that Roland is clued into. He's definitely seen, not that he's seen fully, but I think he knows enough to know, like,
well, he just explained it to us, basically cut and dry. I'm just going to basically summarize is that Roland went into a woman who was a nasty, nasty person.
Yeah, very venomous.
Very venomous, very hateful and everything. When he came through the door, and this is where we were talking just a second ago, when he came through the door, literally the second before he hits the doorway and goes back to his own body, he feels a change to the woman that sits now hugging Eddie, which is not the same woman.
Yeah.
So it's not like he got a brief glimpse of the dangerous woman. He dealt with her the entire ride, first the fight,
yeah,
then the ride to the dressing room. So he knows what he's dealing with.
Yeah.
Giving him that much time, I feel that we know Roland enough to know that he knows exactly what he's dealing with. And when he says something is dangerous, something damn well is dangerous.
Yeah, yeah. This is a guy that's mostly blinked off a lot of danger so far in what we've seen. Tull or, the slow mutants. I mean,
the head-to-head with the freaking demon in the ring.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not mince words. I mean, the dude walked willingly into that.
Yeah.
That's he just talked about it, that it could have killed Jake.
Yeah.
And he walked into that willingly.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, dude's got balls. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I mean, and he knows exactly what he's walking into and knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
So
I'd say Lobstrosities got him, obviously, but I would say with that, it's only because he was like caught off guard. I feel like if he had seen them coming, I feel like he definitely would have been able to hold his own.
Oh, for sure. But it was the disorienting.
Yeah.
Waking up from what he experienced at the end of book 1.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, of all the things we've seen, he's fared pretty well when it comes to dangerous, and he definitely knows dangerous. So we get to subchapter 6 here. First line I have here is the first one. It says, Eddie told her what he could, glossing over the shootout, but being truthful about everything else. Now, why do you think he glossed over the shootout? I find that interesting.
Someone who's never killed before probably can't talk about it very easily.
Okay, so it's more for him than her then. Okay.
Probably.
All right. No, that's good.
Well,
it's one of those. That's a thought that I wouldn't have had. I thought it was maybe more just to censor it for her sake, but no, it makes sense.
I mean, it probably largely is. I mean, if he's worried about himself, why wouldn't he gloss over the drug parts and stuff like that?
Yeah.
But he paints the real picture. I think he glosses over it because it might be a little bit of chivalry.
Or what? Could it also be that he's just basically giving a wide berth to it because of his brother
Henry?
Yeah, I mean that could definitely be it too. And Jack says it here. Maybe he didn't want to go into his brother's death. I really feel like that's. I feel
let's
like
not rip that scab off. It just barely started clotting.
Yeah, I feel like that. Yeah, that's and again because we're talking about here. Let's call it let's guess what maybe a couple days between the doors for them traveling.
No, more than that. You got the whole time where Roland's shuffling.
Yeah, we don't know what
we
that
don't
is,
know how many times.
Yeah.
No, we don't, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
it's more than a couple days.
Yeah, because I guess you do have the recovery, but overall, I don't know. Yeah, you're not talking a long period of time though. He's definitely not going to be over his brother. So it's I mean honestly, that's probably the answer there though.
You want a real answer to that? Go look up how long it takes to get over physical withdrawals of heroin.
Yeah.
Because it's not a couple days.
Yeah,
heroin's a nasty.
No, I'm
drug.
just talking the time travel the door. The shuffle part was fleeting my mind. I was just more talking like.
Well, you got to remember that
traveling up the beach.
Well, you
got to
remember they were traveling during the shuffle time because Roland comes out of the shuffle on the freaking what's it called, a travois.
Yeah,
where he's marveling at Eddie's ingenuity of pulling the laces out and stuff like that from his bag and like his sneakers and stuff like that to tie something together well enough to drag Roland up the beach while he's recovering. So I mean, think about that. Like I marveled at it back then. I mean, coming down from addiction to heroin, which is one of I think you told me that was one of the worst drugs to get over.
Yeah, indeed. So yeah, I think that's probably the raw nerve though, and that's interesting because I guess reading that for almost every time other than asking the question, I guess I always pictured it more maybe for him shielding her, but no, it's probably more so him helping himself in terms of like, I don't want to get close to that. That's
let's avoid that.
Yeah, that whole area there is a little bit probably raw to be touching on. So that's interesting. That's a good reveal for him a little bit. What do you got next?
A little ways down, Roland goes for water, even though it's Eddie's turn. Eddie makes, it's so nice of him to do that. Little comment.
Yeah.
And basically he's talking to Odetta, right? And he says, she listened attentively to Eddie, not speaking at all. Her eyes fixed on his. At one moment, Eddie would guess she was 5 years older than he. At another, he would guess 15. There was one thing he didn't have to guess about. He was falling in love with her. So that just kind of like shifts the dynamic again for everything. Yeah.
Now, in terms of that, like if we want to be like cold calculating, analysts here.
Yeah.
Where do you think the love is maybe coming from the need? Is it coming from the fact that she's from a familiar area in this whole world of unfamiliarity? Mm-hmm. Is it personal? I mean, I feel like there's like the main aspects, or is it just her? And I feel like it's those three things are probably the biggest things at play, or is it just a combination of all of them?
I think it's D, all of the above.
Yeah. Okay.
Is what I would say is that, you throw someone into a survival type situation, and you see it all the time in literature and movies and stuff like that. You'll see couples that end up together or in love or something like that.
Yeah.
That if you took them and put them into a normal, non-dangerous, non-end of the world type thing, they probably wouldn't look twice at each other.
Yeah.
The types of personalities that they are and everything like that.
Yeah.
I mean, like what we're looking at here, we have a socialite type woman from the 60s who has to deal with racism and is a raced warrior. Is that what you would call him?
Yeah, like a
freedom fighter.
Yeah, civil rights activist. Yeah.
To a bopping and weaving heroin addict.
Yeah.
Named Eddie, who's like streetwise from Brooklyn.
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed. All right. Yeah, I guess that's fair. I just it's an interesting question to think about in my mind. But yeah, it probably is all of the above. And then a little bit further down, I've got here. I don't understand, he said finally. What are you knowing? Because she just basically says no.
Yeah, she just looks up and just says no.
Yeah. And then she goes on and says, all of this, Odetta swept her arm. He'd noticed very strong arms, smooth but very strong, indicating the sea, the sky, the beach, the scruffy foothills where the gunslinger is now presumably searching for water. And in parentheses, or maybe getting eaten alive by some new and interesting monster, something Eddie didn't really care to think about, indicating, in short, this entire world. Which is an interesting play. Just deny it all. That's. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's
not highly unexpected. I mean,
no, it's not completely out of left field, but it's an interesting an interesting tactic to just no, it's all fake.
This isn't real.
Yeah, I don't know. That it makes me laugh. I don't know. I think if this kind of any kind of thing like anything like this ever really happened, and it happened to me, I'd probably be way more accepting. I don't know that I'd get into like denial and stuff. I think I'd be like one that would just like roll with like whatever. Maybe that's just being too much of a kid of books and movies and stuff. But like, if some crazy fantastical shit ever happened to me, like whatever. I don't know. I couldn't imagine myself being as much of a denier as some people be as they tend to be in like whatever literature you're reading or whatever movie you're watching. I don't know. Just the denial of the fantastical. I always find it interesting, but who knows? I mean, of course, I just say that as someone that's just reading a book, but.
Me, I'm more of the option 2 here. She said right here, Odetta goes into that there's 2 options. One that she got clubbed in the head pretty hard and she's dreaming.
Yeah.
She talks about like being in a coma before. Do you have any of that highlighted at all?
Go ahead.
I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me see. It's a little further down on the next page for me, but she's talking about it being a vivid dream and how she has been in a coma before. And she says, as vivid as this place seems to be, and you, Eddie, when she said his name, his arm prickled. He had it, all right. He had it bad. And him, she shivered. He seems the most vivid of all. We ought to, we are real, no matter what you think. She gave him a kind smile. It was utterly without belief. And so that just kind of like shows you like her frame of mind is that she's convinced that it's not real.
Yeah.
Like, just 100% convinced.
Yeah, indeed. And then just tiny bit further on here, I have our first sound clip for this episode. Let's go ahead and listen to her story here.
I was struck by a brick. It was our first trip north. We came to the town of Elizabeth, New Jersey. We came in the Jim Crow car. What's that? She looked at him unbelievingly, almost scornfully. Where have you been living, Eddie? In a bomb shelter? I'm from a different time, he said. Could I ask how old you are, Odetta? Old enough to vote and not old enough for Social Security? Well, I guess that puts me in my place. But gently, I hope, she said, and smiled that radiant smile which made his arms prickle. I'm 23, he said, but I was born in 1964, the year you were living in when Roland took you. That's rubbish. No, I was living in 1987 when he took me. Well, she said after a moment, that certainly adds a great deal to your argument for this as reality, Eddie. The Jim Crow car, was it where the black people had to stay? The Negroes, she said. Calling a Negro a black is a trifle rude, don't you think? You'll all be calling yourselves that by 1980 or so, Eddie said. When I was a kid, calling a black kid a Negro was apt to get you in a fight. It was almost like calling him a nigger. She looked at him uncertainly for a moment, then shook her head again.
All right, so yeah, that's kind of getting a little bit, I don't know. We get a little bit of her story, not a ton, but we're kind of getting kind of a back and forth a little bit here. She's not very forthcoming with her age, although in even the 80s, that would have been kind of a faux pas socially to ask a woman her age. I feel
it still kind of is, isn't it?
Is it? I don't know. I've never encountered it necessarily. I guess I haven't asked though. So
I have. I've made that mistake. I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then before we go on further, Jack has a good one here in the chat. He says, I suppose her psychology is based on entirely and flatly denying any other reality, which is actually really. It's actually really insightful when you look at how it was described her not knowing about the other one. Yeah, basically, it fits right in with her. Yeah, because she would have to kind of be able to like essentially deny anything in terms of like for her mind to make up the gaps and stuff, right? Like there's going to be an element of like almost blindly denying a bunch of stuff.
I have a question, and this is one I need the chat and Tad's help with. Do you think she actually went to Oxford Town?
Yeah, I think so.
Do you really think so?
Yeah.
Or do you think that was just another black spot where Dada was in control?
No, I think she went down there. I mean, because remember her luggage was beat up and stuff. Like there was,
right?
I think I think it would have been something that was like on the news and stuff as well. I think like, yeah. Now the question I would have is, how do you with her, like, I mean, how does that work? Would there have ever been a time that Detta took over down there? Would be an interesting thing, or was it always her? And if it was always her, it's like then like is Detta mindful of when to take over? Because I feel like we kind of got the sense that Detta's a little bit more knowing, a little bit more aware than Odetta is. Not that she's like fully aware. And we also got the line of like, not that she would even care, right? When it says like she doesn't know the other one was rich, but she wouldn't care even if she did know.
No, yeah.
So like, I don't know.
I was just curious because like she makes up stories for her missing time, right? Like it's not a matter of she talks about her driver and everything like that, and then it's just like all of a sudden she'll be back home and it'll be like, okay, come pick me up tomorrow. And he's like, you've been gone for 3 weeks. She's like, what are you talking about? You drove me everywhere for the last, 3 days.
Yeah.
You've driven me 4 different places over the last 3 days. He's like,
Yeah.
no, I didn't. She's like, yeah, you did, silly. And it's just like, part of me is like, did Oxford Town actually happen then? Or is that all in Odetta's head? And that's just a time when Detta was in control. Because, I mean, her luggage getting beat up, that doesn't sound entirely like something that wouldn't happen to Detta,
Yeah.
She's kind of a bitch. People may take it out on her luggage.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always taken it at face value that she was down there. Especially because it's so vivid. I mean, we get some pretty descriptive things about everything there, like even like being held in the jail cell without a bathroom, and like I just feel like there's a lot of it that's so vivid. Whereas like it feels like when she's covering for lost time, it's just kind of like there's no specifics, it's just like, you've driven me around the last couple of days. Like it feels way more vague. So I guess that's me, where I'd be like, no, like that's way more spelled out, way more whatever. And also, wouldn't that also put her in an awkward situation that with her being a civil rights activist, if she claimed to have gone there, and if the people that she's around all the time are people that were there, I think that would root her out fairly quickly in some way and probably make her somewhat of a pariah.
Fair point.
Yeah. Agamorphy said that's the first time hearing Frank Muller's take on the multiple characters. Well, that's awesome. I'm glad. I wasn't sure who all has listened and not, but yeah, Frank is definitely one of the best. You've probably, if you've heard us on other episodes talking, he does end up getting in a motorcycle accident and doesn't complete the series. There's a point where we replace him, unfortunately, and since the first book was rewritten, you actually get the other guy for the first book, and then 5, 6, and 7. But Frank's 2, 3, 4. I think 2, 3, and 4. But yeah, he's absolutely the best, and yeah, his accents are incredible. He does a really good job embodying the characters for sure.
Especially his New York, his Eddie.
Yeah, his Eddie's great. Yeah, indeed. And I think even like his Odetta and Detta voices are really good too. I feel like he does a good job across the board. I like his Jake. In fact, like in our intro, for instance, the last line of Jake, the audiobook I have most easy access to is the George Guidel book 1. So I actually had to go to this book's argument section to get his last line.
Oh, geez.
And I want to say they even break it up in the argument. So I actually had to edit where it's like Jake said, and then like there are other worlds and these is the other. Like, so I had to like edit those out to where it flows as one sentence. So like I went out of my way to like make sure Frank's was in our intro. But yeah, he does a great job with the voices for sure. And yeah, he eventually did pass away, but yeah, he's awesome. And then Agamorphy says some cases split personality patients know their other personalities exist, perhaps not in Odetta's case. Yeah, I believe that like
they make it perfectly clear that they don't know about each other.
She doesn't, but no, it is definitely true though that people with multiple personalities, some are aware of them, and will even like give breakdowns of like who's there, who is possible that could show up, and like their personality types and stuff. So yeah,
there's some fascinating stuff out there if you want to go read about it. I mean, like there's the horrific one that you told me about that still freaks me the fuck out to this day.
Which isn't multiple personalities. It's similar.
It's similar, but it's one where it's kind of like that, but it's a lot. It's a lot to do with the blacking out. And if you want to have nightmares, I mean, I'll tell you because it still haunts me. Tad told me this. We were talking about Odetta and Detta.
Yeah,
3 book clubs ago.
Few episodes back. Yeah.
Ted told me about this one where it's basically
it's called a dissociative fugue.
Dissociative fugue, which is basically where you just wake up and decide that you don't even wake up and decide. You just wake up
and you're someone else,
thinking you're someone else, and that's it.
And some people,
so that's where it's like, this is in my house, so they'll get up and they'll walk out and they'll go find where they're supposed to be. And sometimes they wake up from it, sometimes they don't.
Yeah. And sometimes they wake up 5 years later and they're living in a different city with a different family, and
then remember
their first
life.
Yeah. So
that's terrifying. That still freaks me the fuck out.
I'm glad I could get in your head so well there with that kind of thing.
No, she has not forgiven him for that story yet.
And then also, Agmorby mentioned Sybil. Yeah, I want to say, was Sybil aware? I can't remember. It's been a while since I read the stuff on Sybil. I can't remember if she was aware of the other personalities or not. But yeah, there's definitely multiple ways that it's portrayed. But yeah, definitely here King gives it to us in a way that she is not aware of the other personalities, which makes sense because they're so vastly different.
Right. What I was responding to was Jack's question: has Peter's wife forgiven Tad for that story?
Yeah.
No. I just answered that question. I didn't realize I clicked after you said Sybil that I didn't actually explain that. Yes, I did tell my wife that story about the disassociative fugue, and she's not too happy with Tad. She's generally not too happy with Tad, mostly though. I mean, she and Tad are they're good friends, but there's bad instances where Tad is a little too Tad for her taste. So there's instances where I tell her stories about what me and Tad have gotten up to shenanigans wise, and she's not too happy with
Definitely
us.
A lot of shenanigans. Indeed. But then as we get back here a little bit further down, we got a quote. It says, "My father had begun to make money by then, but all I knew was that there was that we were getting ahead. That's what my mother always called it. And once I told her a little girl I played with had asked if my daddy was rich, my mom told me that what I was supposed to say if any other chums ever asked that question was that we were getting ahead. So we were able to give Aunt Blue some lovely china sets, and I remember." And then her voice faltered. One hand rose to her temple and rubbed absently as if a headache were beginning there. Now, we remember from a little while ago, that Andrew, right, the driver, made a very astute observation that the headaches were often a precursor to her disappearances, which for us as readers, because Andrew's not as privy as we are to what that is, that means that this is King very brilliantly giving us the whole Alfred Hitchcock thing of like, don't just have a bomb go off. You got to like tell the audience that there's a bomb under a chair and it has 15 minutes left and two people are at the table talking minutia bullshit because it's tension. Here, King's just lit that fuse and said, okay, well,
have fun.
Yeah, readers, you guys got something to deal with here pretty soon because here's the first step is headaches. So
yeah, and then the other step was hearing her like not only the headaches, but her talking funny a little bit afterwards, after the headaches, like the rubbing the temples and stuff like that. And continuing with where you dropped off, remember what, Odetta? I remember my mother gave her a for special. What? I'm sorry, I got a headache. It got my tongue tangled. I don't know why I'm bothering to tell you this anyways. Do you mind? No, I don't. I meant to say my mother gave her a special plate. And so that's where you've seen that as well with Andrew. So if you're paying attention at home, you're just like, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah, indeed. So this is definitely lighting that fuse, and we're going to kind of see a few instances here as we go on of the headache thing. So we're going to go on. She's going to continue to tell. She tells a little bit about the plate here. Let's see. And she's saying she can see the plate. And they were basically going up to New York for this wedding. They're going to give these plates as a wedding present. They talk about the Jim Crow cars again. And then Eddie's kind of having a little bit of a memory flash a little bit, but he doesn't know exactly why when it comes to Oxford Town, as she mentions that again.
Yeah.
And he isn't fully understanding why, but he's getting kind of flashes of like dirty, wet diapers and his brother, which, is most likely we're going to see as, some kind of association of some kind.
Yeah.
Like a word association thing, which then makes her ask, is he all right? And he says, yeah, you shiver. Donald Duck walked over my grave.
I love that line. I don't know why, but I do.
And then she goes on and says, at least it didn't spoil the wedding. And then as they were going back from the wedding, a cab driver took off without them because they were black. And then that's basically when she was hit by the brick, because that's kind of where we're ultimately at here. She's telling the story of, because she mentions that she was in a coma, and now we're kind of seeing what happened. So she, they're walking the mile. It was, I think, something like that.
It says less than a mile.
Less than a mile, and basically they're going to just walk because they're afraid the cabs, if they call another cab, will do the same thing, take off because they're black. So they're walking. And then the next line I have that I wanted to highlight, because I just synopsized a little bit there. I remember wondering if my daddy meant my face would actually start to glow or something when I saw the clock at Central Park, and if that might not hurt. And that's when the brick came down on my head. Everything went dark for a while. Then the dream started. Vivid dreams, she smiled. And then Eddie, this dream, did the brick fall or did somebody bomb you? She said, I'm sorry, like this dream, Eddie. So she's kind of being coy there. Then he asks if it fell or did somebody bomb you? They never found anyone. The police, my mother told me a long time after when I was 16 or so, found the place where they thought the brick had been. There were other bricks missing and some were loose. It was just outside the window of a 4th floor room in an apartment building that had been condemned. But of course, there were a lot of people staying there just the same, especially at night. So kind of ambiguous as to exactly what happened here. But basically, brick fell down, hit her on the head, and she talks about the vivid dreams, but most likely the coma as we move on here.
Yeah. And then she goes on talking about her parents and the cab driver. And then she asks Eddie, will your lobster creatures come out soon? No, Eddie said, not until dusk. So one of your ideas is that this is a coma dream, like the ones you had when you got bopped by the brick. Only this time you think it was a billy club or something. Yes. What's the other one? Odeta's face and voice were calm enough, but her head was filled with an ugly skein of images which all added up to Oxford Town. How did that song go? 2 men killed by the light of the moon. Somebody better investigate soon. Not quite right, but it was close. Close. I may have gone insane, she said. And that's where I was going to allude to earlier. You mentioned it, that you would be very apt and not as distrusting as Odetta is. You'd be more of an Eddie if something like this happened to you.
Yeah.
I'd be full Odetta. I would honestly believe that it's not real. I'd honestly believe that I'd gone insane.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a great imagination, but if all of a sudden shit like this started happening.
Yeah. And again, like I said, I will admit that all this is coming from me as just someone that reads and watches and stuff. If it really happened, maybe it'd be different, but I would like to think that I'd be more open to
I
things.
would love the idea of being open and everything like that. You're a wizard, Peter, something like that. But no, I in the deepest parts of my heart, I got a feeling that I'd just be like, all right, Peter's gone cuckoo. What size straitjacket did I wear again?
All right, indeed. Okay, subchapter 7.
Yep.
The first words which came to Eddie's mind were, if you think you've gone insane, Odetta, you're nuts.
Eddie the poet.
Brief consideration, however, made this seem like an unprofitable line of argument to take. Good call there, Eddie, as Jim Carrey might say. What do you got next?
Were you really a heroin addict? This is just a little bit further down from where you are. He said, it's like being an alcoholic or basing. It's not a thing you ever get over. I used to hear that and go, yeah, right, in my head. But now I understand. I still want it, and I guess a part of me will always want it, but the physical part has passed. And that's what I was talking about, is the heroin addiction he's passed all of the physical side of it, which can take a while.
Yeah, and can kill you. That's definitely one of those ones that, I believe that's like when they give people other drugs.
I was going to say,
offset, so
you were talking one time after a book club, I think, or maybe it was on a book club. We're talking about how people aren't supposed to just quit heroin without getting medical help.
Yeah,
it's one of those ones
it's pretty rough.
It will and can kill you.
Yeah, indeed. Then they go on talking about basing and 80s type stuff, definitely, where she doesn't understand it. So more of that. Then we go on. We kind of get a little bit about Eddie and his brother and some of their grooming habits that changed because of the war, right? Like they were
right.
It was one way. Then he goes to Nam, comes back, and he's super fanatical about certain things like teeth, hair, feet. The basic things that soldiers tend to obsess about. And then of course Eddie picks up on that and almost becomes brainwashed himself, to where it mentions that he's shaving with Roland's knife, which that's got to be fun.
Right? Like how sharp it's described as?
Yeah, shaving, like safety blades, everything else. Like, I couldn't imagine using like just a full on knife and just like,
Shing,
yeah,
shing, shing.
I don't know. Like I love the idea of like the straight razor shave and that whole thing, but like, yeah, I don't know.
What are you talking about? When was the last time you shaved? Not trimmed that massive growth of beard on your face. When's the last time you shaved?
Shaved? Oh, I don't know. It's been years.
Yeah.
I'd probably say at least 4 years or so. Yeah, I'm just protesting the high cost of razors.
Sure. Right. It's not the razors, it's the blades. Razors are cheap.
Yeah, it's all a scam.
Yeah, it is.
All the shaving syndicates and their nonsense. Okay, so then he asks too clean cut. He asked Granny because she says he doesn't look like a drug addict.
Yeah.
He says no, too white. She said shortly, and then was quiet for a moment, looking out sternly over the sea. Eddie was quiet too. If there was a comeback for something like that, he didn't know what it was. I'm sorry, she said. That was very unkind, very unfair, and very unlike me. It's all right. No, or it's not. It's like a white person saying something. Yeah. There's that's all I had highlighted. Actually, was the top part. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. It's I find that interesting because you are dealing with a different time. Like in the 60s, you had a lot more addicts were in the black community. So for her to say that, it actually would fit that time period where it's just like, no, that's not what you expect from an addict. And some of that is even like media, right? Like there was like a lot of media that basically portrayed certain things a certain way. And it wasn't really until the 80s that you really started to see like the excesses of like Wall Street and stuff and everything else in like the 80s with like your cocaine and everything that kind of hit this. Like it became a different element, and like it just changed things, and the way people in the 70s or 60s or 50s would have thought about things would not jive with what Eddie in 1987 would think. So I find that interesting. I'm a history fan. I don't know. I'm sure that's come through, or I've said that before.
In case you guys were wondering.
But yeah, I always find that kind of stuff interesting because, like, thinking about cultures, because I've always find that interesting too, like how culture changes throughout different time periods.
Oh yeah,
and yeah, you're talking about night and day differences of 1987 and 1964. Like,
sure.
That's a huge leap. That's almost different worlds, which I think we allude to here a little bit. And then a little bit further down, Eddie says that there's a third alternative. This is really happening. I mean, Eddie cleared his throat. I'm not very good at this philosophical shit, or metamorphosis or whatever the hell you call it. You mean metaphysics? Maybe. I don't know. I think so. But I think you can't, but I know you can't go around disbelieving what your senses tell you. Why, if your idea about this is all being a dream is right, I didn't say dream. Whatever you said, it comes down to the same, isn't it? False reality, which is definitely true on his point. And then they get into talking about the debate, like, he was on debate. Then we get into more of the differences of, like, he says gays. She doesn't understand that, which again, I give props to King too, because that would not have been a term used in the 60s. They would have just said homosexuals and not gays. That was a phrase that came later. So see, again, it's this small kind of stuff that really makes me like happy, because I'm like, oh, I'm glad he got that right. Like, it'd be easy for someone to like errantly right, because I've seen that before. I saw something where it was like a book set in like the 60s, and I want to say that they were using the term weed heavily for pot. And I'm like, no, I'm not saying that it didn't exist then, but it's not what they would have called it. That's more now. They would have been calling it grass, or like there's a number of things they could have called it. But it's things like that bother me. So when people get it right, I'm like, okay, good. Thank you for not getting that wrong.
Right.
But then let's see. Actually, do you have anything more beyond? I have a sound clip a little bit further down here.
No, actually, that's where I'm looking. Is a little bit further down. So play the sound clip. It's probably the part that I'm looking at.
All right, let's go ahead and listen to that. Another Frank Muller special here as he delivers up some more of Eddie and Odetta. Or wait, is this Roland? I have one that's Roland too. No, this is them. Okay, Roland's still gone. Sorry, I want to not get things confused here. All right, let's take a listen here.
I don't want to debate you. I want to wake you up to the fact that you are awake. That's all. I might be able to at least operate provisionally according to the dictates of your third alternative, as long as this situation continued to go on, except for one thing. There's a fundamental difference between what happened to you and what happened to me. So fundamental, so large that you haven't seen it. Then show it to me. There is no discontinuity in your consciousness. There is a very large one in mine. I don't understand. I mean, you can account for all of your time, Odetta said. Your story follows from point to point. The airplane, the incursion by by him. She nodded toward the foothills with clear distaste. The stashing of the drugs, the officers who took you into custody, all the rest. It's a fantastic story. It has no missing links. As for myself, I arrived back from Oxford, was met by Andrew, my driver, and brought back to my building. I bathed and I wanted sleep. I was getting a very bad headache, and sleep is the only medicine that's any good for the really bad one. But it was close on midnight, and I thought I would watch the news first. Some of us had been released, but a good many more were still in the jug when we left. I wanted to find out if their cases had been resolved. I dried off and put on my robe and went into the living room. I turned on the TV news. The newscaster started talking about a speech Khrushchev had just made about the American advisors in Vietnam. He said, "We have a film report from..." And then he was gone, and I was rolling down this beach. You say you saw me in some sort of magic doorway, which is now gone, and that I was in Macy's, and that I was stealing. All of this is preposterous enough, but even if it was so, I could find something better to steal than costume jewelry. I don't wear jewelry. You better look at your hands again, Eddie said quietly. For a very long time she looked from the diamond on her left pinky, too large and vulgar to be anything but paste, to the large opal on the third finger of her right hand, which was too large and vulgar to be anything but real. "None of this is happening," she repeated firmly. "You sound like a broken record." He was genuinely angry for the first time. "Every time someone pokes a hole in your neat little story, you just retreat to that none of this is happening shit. You have to wise up, Detta." "Don't call me that! I hate that!" burst out, so shrilly that Eddie recoiled. "Sorry. Jesus, I didn't know."
So Eddie crossing a line there that he didn't know. I mean, we obviously as a reading audience know why that line exists, but yeah, definitely interesting there. I find that interesting that she's literally remembers the line almost of the news report for her. That's how like real it is, that like like it goes literally from mid sentence of 11 o'clock news to like being on this beach. Like, that's hard. I will give it to her. That's a tough one.
Yeah. And that's where
That'd
Eddie
be a tough one to swallow.
And that's where Eddie also right here at the end talks about poking holes in her story, because the next actually part is the next like section is what I had highlighted is that he says, "Sorry, Jesus, I didn't know which was right at the end of the clip." And she says, "I went from night to day, from undressed to dressed, from my living room to this deserted beach. And what really happened was that some big-bellied redneck deputy hit me upside the head with a club, and that is all. But your memories don't stop in Oxford," he said softly. "What? Uncertain again? Or maybe seeing and not wanting to, like with the rings? If you got whacked in Oxford, how come your memories don't stop there? There isn't always a lot of logic to things like this." She was rubbing her temples again. "And now, if it's all the same to you, Eddie, I was as soon end this conversation. My headache is back. It's quite bad." And that's where it's just like, for me as an Eddie type, that would be so frustrating. It's like, good God, I just gave you two examples of why your theories are wrong.
Yeah.
And it's just I don't want to talk to you anymore. I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Don't talk to me.
Yeah, that'd be a rough one, man. I grate my teeth at this kind of stuff, because I would just be, you know me well enough. Over the years, if we get into a debate, which we do, it's lively and friendly. We're all about it.
Oh yeah.
But like, and we warned people early on in this show that if it ever got what it sounded like heated, it's really not. It's just the way we operate.
We've literally we've literally had people stop us and be like, "Are you guys fighting?" We're like, "Huh?
Yeah.
No, you guys are fighting. Like, are you guys okay? Are you guys gonna still be friends?" "Yeah, we're gonna go to lunch here in about a half hour together." Like, what's the problem?
You know what's funny is we warned people about that early on, but it never really happened on this show much.
I think it's happened like once or twice at most.
Yeah, very rarely. It's kind of interesting because I don't know. It feels like even as we were moving towards with like things with the movie and stuff, and we were talking about like aspects where like, and then we agreed on, and then I'm like, man, it's like since we started the show, we're agreeing more than we ever have before. But one of the ground rules we've always had is you can't just like cut an argument off because you don't like where things are going. Like, because that's kind of poor sportsmanship, right?
Oh,
like,
sure.
That'd be like taking your ball and going home because the score's like out of your control, you know? So yeah, that the whole idea of just like, okay, we're done with this conversation because I'm losing is like one of my least favorite things that people try to employ. And then Eddie calls her on it and says, I guess whether or not logic fits into it depends on what you want to believe. I saw you in the Macy's, Odetta. I saw you stealing. You say you don't do things like that, but you also told me you don't wear jewelry. You told me, even though you've looked down at your hands several times while we were talking, those rings were there, but it's as if you couldn't see them until I called your attention to them and made you see them. I don't want to talk about it, she shouted. My head hurts. So that's interesting, too, because that's actually somewhat of a bit of a reveal to kind of show us more of the mechanics of the Detta and Odetta dichotomy. Is not only does her mind fill in these gaps, but it will blind itself to clear discontinuities, basically, which is interesting. That's a really interesting one.
It was brought up earlier with Andrew talking about like where she would get like black eyes or bruises from and everything. And she would say, "Oh, I slipped in the tub."
Yeah. But like, and maybe it's like one of these things that Detta and Odetta are both really good at. Like, I think it's more Odetta or Detta. I mean, I feel like with Detta, is a little bit maybe more conscious of things. Because I feel like with like Detta, like with the jeweler, would make sure that it's taken off before kind of almost retracting away.
Yeah.
There's just something about it that feels to me that Detta's more in control than Odetta, and maybe it's just the personality itself. But like this because something so unreal happened, now you're suddenly in a spot where Odetta's sitting here and she has the jewelry on still. I don't think this ever would have happened in the real world. Detta would never have allowed it. But now that it has,
Detta is kind of aware that there's something going on,
even if it's like subconsciously, and I feel like it helps her control the situation.
Right.
And now that this whole thing has kind of ruined that, Odetta has completely blinded to the fact that she's wearing these rings. And like, you know, like if you're talking an opal that's too big and vulgar to be anything but real, like that's not a small piece. That's not like a little dainty ring. That's going to be like a pretty big, like, how do you not feel that, right? It's like wearing a watch, you know? Like, so I mean,
from knuckle to knuckle on the fingers, that type of ring.
So it's like one of those, like, not only are you like visually not seeing it, you're like blinding yourself to it, but you're also not feeling it. You're not feeling the weight of it. You're not feeling like any, like, it just, that's a very high level blockery almost.
No, and that's what Jack's line here goes perfectly with what you're saying. He says, I feel like the mind will do whatever it can to protect itself. That's exactly it.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that if Odetta and Detta became aware of themselves, aware of each other, I should say, that would be a very bad thing for that for both of them on the whole.
Yeah, because I think that they're both like, even though they both seem strong in their own way, I think it's a very fragile setup.
Yeah,
and very little could potentially cause the whole thing to crumble in a way. So I feel like it's got to be it's like almost like self-preservational.
Right. That's what I mean.
To for both, because they both exist because this facade is allowed to continue.
Right.
And that, so it's going to do whatever it can to be like, no, there's no rings. What are you talking about? You know, and then
this isn't real.
And then like we get her, she's shouting at him now at the end here because he's pointed it out. He's not only now has he pointed out some error in her logic, but he's pointing out like a physical,
proof.
Yeah,
proof.
It's like this is hard evidence, basically.
Exhibit A, Your Honor.
Yeah, exactly. And with that, you get the most violent reaction from Odetta that we've seen up to this point. We've seen Odetta go through quite a bit. Yeah. And even like some of her story being in Oxford Town, we've seen her we've heard her tell us stories of her in very extreme circumstances, and she never breaks past like what, her kind of a very controlled, like she keeps she keeps her dignity, I guess is what I'm saying. So with her shouting here, Eddie's touched kind of a nerve a little bit, and it probably is because there is somewhat of a fragility to kind of the whole setup that we got here.
For sure.
Agamorphy says, you guys never fought like Siskel and Ebert. Geez, the Flag Summit was people, and I actually was surprised about that a little bit, but like, I feel like we both felt like it was almost so like, almost formal that it was
well, not only that, but it was also it was honestly a large part of it was explanation.
Yeah.
Was like, we've made jokes before, but I got to tell you guys, we've never had a debate about Flag like that before.
No,
that was the very first time we went in depth. We've touched
on edges of it, I think, but like never the fact where we got that heavy into it. But yeah, I don't know. It is interesting, but yeah, I guess we could still throw the warning out there because who knows? There may still be a time that the classic Tad and Peter buddy heads might come out. And I'm not saying like we're going to like orchestrate it, but it could happen. And I'd hope that if there's newer listeners, they would know that like, it's just us.
It's just us.
Well, we'll know, though, if there's ever a time that I, like, cut in at the very beginning of an episode and go, A warning for everyone. During this episode, Peter and I got very heated. Please know that this is normal for us.
We are still friends.
Yeah, the show is not over. We're not ending the show.
The show will go on.
The show must go on. Yeah, so I find that interesting for sure to kind of see how, again, it's the mechanics of it all. We talked about the mechanics of the door. We talked about that kind of, but now we're talking about the mechanics of like exactly how far she goes to make sure that it's not exposed almost to herself, which is interesting. It's almost like the same elaborateness of like covering up a huge lie, right? But it's from yourself, so that's really interesting. And then last little bit here, I have at the tail end of this subchapter. He stood by her for a moment, but his head was bowed, or her head was bowed. The tips of her fingers steadily massaging her temples. Eddie went to meet Roland. So again, King, I think like 3 to 5 times in this subchapter has referenced her rubbing her head, and again just alluding that he's showing us like telegraphing it, with a billboard basically saying, hey guys, remember, if you guys don't
if this is Hitchcock's analogy that Tad gave earlier of the bomb under the table, this is mid conversation, the camera panning down to give you another shot of the bomb with how much time is left and coming back up.
Yeah, exactly. Indeed. Or like the ticking getting louder as the scene goes on. Like the audience is hearing it, but the people on the screen don't. Yeah. Indeed.
That would be so nerve-wracking.
Yeah, it's a great, there's a really cool video you can see on like on YouTube, or somebody like highlights it, because it's a classic thing for Hitchcock. He's like, don't just scare people. You got to like build it up, because that's where people get.
And
King does it. King does it great.
And not to get off subject real fast, but this is what me and you have talked about with horror over the last 2 decades, is where it's gone from building the tension.
Yeah.
Halloween, Psycho,
Blair Witch Project,
to jump scares.
Just jump scares. Yeah.
Paranormal Activity.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Dude,
I'll tell you right now, it was great at
the ones that stay with you are the ones that build it. Like
The Exorcist.
I don't know. Yeah, The Exorcist.
Dude,
I don't know if you watch Hereditary, but you need to put that on the top of your freaking list, man.
No.
That movie was like, I know it's a tangent, but whatever. Great movie.
This is what happens when I mention horror films with around Tad.
Dude, the Hereditary, dude. Oh my God, it's one of the greatest horror movies. 30 years.
By the way, we talked about this at the end of Captain Marvel. The Us. You guys were saying that everyone was saying they wanted to go see that. Watched that trailer with my wife yesterday.
Oh yeah, with Jordan Peele's new movie.
Yeah,
indeed. It's gonna be a good couple months. There's a lot of great movies coming out. Some good horror movies. Pet Sematary is coming soon.
Woo!
Subchapter 8. Last bit of this chapter here. Sit down. Eddie took the bags. You look all in. I am. I'm getting sick again. Eddie looked at the gunslinger's flushed cheeks and brow, his cracked lips, and nodded. I hope it wouldn't happen, but I'm not surprised, man. You didn't bat for the cycle. Balzar didn't have enough Keflex. I don't understand you. If you don't take penicillin drug long enough, it doesn't kill the infection. You just drive it underground a few days, and a few days go by, and it comes back. We'll need more. At least there's another door to go, or at least there's a door to go. There's a door to go. In the meantime, you'll just have to take it easy. So that's, and then he starts to think in his mind about, Odetta's missing legs. And basically this is the worst possible time for Roland to be relapsing into his sickness, because they've now taken on another person. And this person is, as we discovered some time ago, is going to be in need of a little bit more help because she's in a wheelchair.
Yep.
So that's interesting. What do you got next?
This is where Eddie says, I have to tell you something about Odetta. That's her name. Uh-huh. Very lovely, the gunslinger said. Yeah, I thought so too. What isn't so lovely is the way she feels about this place. She doesn't think she's here. I know, and she doesn't like me very much, does she? Is it humor? Like, that's him making a joke, right?
No, I don't see that. I see that's just him being perceptive. And think about it, he hasn't interacted with her much. So is he getting this from just the fact of knowing what he went through that door, and just knowing that inherently she's not going to like him?
Right. It could be.
Yeah, that's kind of what I interpreted as when I started thinking about it. Because at first I'm just like, this might just be kind of like that, a little bit jovial, where it's, oh yeah, that person, like me and you have had this conversation. Like, oh yeah, that person doesn't like me much, do they? Like one of your other friends or something. Like, you know, yeah, no, they don't. It's like, oh yeah, I figured. And there's just like a joviality to it. But like this, I always pictured as more just like, he hasn't had the experience to know that, outside of the fact of what happened behind the door. And it's almost just like him knowing that, like, hey, I know what happened in there, and I know she is not going to like me because she was aware of me, like way more than Eddie was. She fought me like almost violently inside. Like, so because of that, there's almost going to be an ingrained subconscious dislike of me. So that's how I took it. I don't know. Maybe it is a joke. Maybe I'm just going a little bit more serious, but go on.
A little bit further down, listen, the gunslinger said, and listen carefully. Our lives may depend on it. Mine because I'm getting sick again, and yours because you have fallen in love with her. Eddie said nothing. She is 2 women in the same body. She was 1 woman when I entered her, and another when I returned here. Now Eddie could say something. There was something else, something strange, but either I didn't understand it or I did, and it slipped away. It seemed important. Roland looked past Eddie, looked at the beached wheelchair, standing alone at the end of its short track from nowhere. Then he looked back to Eddie. I understand very little of this, or how such a thing can be, but you must be on your guard, and that's like italicized. Do you understand that? Yes. Eddie's lungs felt as if they had very little wind in them. He understood, or had at least a moviegoer's understanding of the sort of the thing the gunslinger was speaking of, but he didn't have the breath to explain it, not yet. He felt as if Roland had kicked all the breath out of him. Good, because the woman I entered on the other side of the door was as deadly as those lobster things that come out at night.
Yeah, indeed. So, yeah, I feel like, so is there, because like we talked almost early on in this episode, pretty much at the beginning, was Eddie was like, Roland was taking his turn to get water, and he didn't want to necessarily take like warm feelings from him, even though he kind of was. Yeah. Is that Roland's way of keeping his distance from her altogether, more so than anything else? Like, 'cause like my first impression is like, if this was a movie and I was watching it, my interpretation of it would be, oh well, he is just gonna let these two, because Eddie needs her.
It's awkward.
Like
they're crying.
Give them the space. But there's part of me that with this makes me think like he knows that there's gonna be a hatred towards him from her. He knows that she's fucking dangerous, so he's going to take the turn, even though he's not feeling well, because he wants to keep his distance. Because he maybe even in fear of like triggering, that the one that he encountered on the other side of the door to come back. Maybe all he has to do is say the wrong thing, or like just the anger that she might have towards him because he doesn't know how it works.
No, and he says that right there, that he doesn't understand it.
Yeah. So, that's definitely puts us in a good spot in terms of like drama, to be like, hey, like here we are at the end of the subchapter, or at the end of the chapter, and you guys can kind of chew on that a little bit, and that is pretty much puts us at time too. So I think we will go ahead and wrap up this episode. It's been a fun one.
I got 4 names from the chat for our.
Oh, awesome. That's good. You'll have to send those over to me, and I will compile that and figure it out. I'm almost certain that I'm going to be able to build a poll on our website.
Cool.
And then I will first I'll build a bracket to have like a thing to go off of, and and then from there we'll go and start doing it. I don't know. What do you think? A week? How long do you think a vote should be? I guess for
1 week.
And the thing is like it could be like a week per round too, right? The first week's going to have a number of rounds. Do them potentially all at the same time. We don't have to do it like one singular vote per week.
No, do round 1.
Yeah.
For a week. Round 2.
And we'll probably end. We'll probably end outside of March, but we at least start it here for the most.
That's all that matters. Is you started in March.
Yeah, for the most hated Dark Tower character. This should be fun. There's another one there in the chat. It's a little bit of a typo, but it's definitely one to add to the list there. Oh yeah, 2 weeks for the listeners who cry off the book club. Yeah, that's true. I mean, if there are people that don't listen to the book clubs for one reason or another.
Did we talk about this last episode?
We didn't. It came to me between.
Oh,
because I started.
So we better not start it until after the next episode.
I'll start compiling everything though. And
put it together, but
yeah,
let's not start it till after the next roundtable.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. So, Jack, I can't say anything because we're still on the podcast, but I will say that has already been put forward, so you can go ahead and we can mark that down as another jot for that one, because that is indeed one, and that one did surprise me. But that is one. And sorry for the people on the podcast, but if you're on the podcast side, send a tweet at us, email us, get those names to us. Let's see what you guys have. I know this is book club, but for this contest, we're going all the way through the series. So let us know what you guys have, most hated characters. So let me go ahead and pull up the outro stuff. If you guys want to find like our show notes and stuff, which there isn't one going to be one for this episode, but where to keep an eye out for the bracketing for this will be at darktowerpalaver.com, which is our website. So check that out. Also check out the things if you're a new listener to questions to answer in your email. There's a number of ways for you to engage with the show. Peter can tell you about those.
Best way to do it is email us. It's darktowerpalaver@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook. It's facebook.com/darktowerpalaver. We're also on the Twitter. It's @darktowerpod, @darktowerpod. Our show stream live, and you can also find old roundtables on youtube.com/darktowerpalaver.
Indeed. And for the podcast audience, we will say to you as we always do, long days and pleasant nights.
Long days and pleasant nights, folks.
And everyone in the live chat. Yeah, so now that we're off the podcast, we have Calvin Tower mentioned as well.
All right, here's my list that I'm going to be sending to Tad for you guys, just to make sure that no one got missed. Mordred, Rhea of the Coos, Gasher, Cordelia, Chase, Stephen King.
He's been mentioned on Twitter at least twice.
I definitely understand it. And then Cy Tower himself, Calvin Tower.
Yeah, which... that doesn't, you know the one that I will say, I can't remember who brought it up now. I don't know if you took any credit. Not that it matters, because I'm not going to like put that into the poll itself. But the Cordelia has not come up yet, and I don't understand that.
She's a piece of shit.
How did she? Yeah, like
she's a piece of shit.
How has she not been mentioned already?
Because there's a bigger piece of shit in that book that overshadows her.
She's one of the
when
worst.
You're staring at this big a piece of shit as Rhea of the Coos, and then you got Cordelia, this small piece of shit compared to her. That's why she gets overshadowed. She's in the shadow of a bigger piece of shit.
Yeah, but that almost camouflaged her from getting in our tournament.
Well, it's the same as Gasher and TikTok Man.
Gasher almost, and that was one of the ones that instantly came to mind when I came up with the idea. As I was like, he's one of the ones that he's fucking reprehensible.
He's a piece of shit.
Yeah, he's just terrible. And like every time you get close to like Ludd, I'm just like, oh god, here we go with this shit.
Do we want to add Jack Mort?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We want Jack?
Oh yeah. Yeah, there was a typo, or that's what I mentioned. But Cordelia is definitely one I'm glad did not get missed, because I didn't even think of it either when people are like tweeting me names, and I was like, oh yeah, like because there's ones I expected. I'm like, okay, I know Mordred's going to be on there, almost top of the list.
Yes, Jack, she was mentioned earlier. That's what Tad's talking about.
Yeah, somebody earlier in the chat mentioned her, but she hadn't been mentioned like on Twitter, because this has been up on Twitter and Facebook for about a week now.
That's what he means.
And I hadn't seen her. She hadn't been mentioned yet, and I haven't checked Twitter in the last few days. So unless she came in on the last few days, she wasn't mentioned, which surprised. But again, you're right. It's probably Rhea kind of eclipsing her. But God, and what about the that book has got. But see, somebody mentioned I just blanked. Coffin Hunters, Eldred Jonas.
Yeah.
But they said that they don't put him on the list because like they love him. He's a great villain. I'm like, I can roll with that. Like I actually have any kind of hatred for him either. Like I feel like he's just one you may root against depending on how you align, I suppose. But like I don't like, he's never one where like makes me grate my teeth and go, I want this fucker to die, you know, like, whereas like Cordelia or Rhea, it's like, yeah, you want this character fucking gone.
No, yeah, Mark, you're more than okay to nominate more than one. That's totally okay.
Yeah.
So don't think that you're done with Cordelia. You can definitely do Cordelia, Jack Mort, and any others that you want.
Yeah, indeed. So yeah, thank you guys in the chat. You guys have made it fun. Some input definitely with the contest here.
2 shows back to back with great turnouts. I love it. I love it.
Indeed. It's been great. And yeah, just a fun episode too. It was definitely I don't know, definitely some fun stuff to talk about. So yeah, thank you guys for joining us. We will be back same bat time, same bat channel in a couple weeks here for a roundtable.
Yeah.
And there we'll with that one, maybe I'll even have it all ready to where we can launch it at the same time this episode gets posted, or the next episode gets posted.
Should we do a little announcement kind of thing news wise for just the people on the chat? The news that you texted me about the other day for what movie got a director?
Oh yeah, I don't have it down though.
But the Talisman, you guys can look it up. The Talisman got a director.
Yeah, Talisman. Talisman got a director. It's Amblin Pictures, which is Steven Spielberg's company.
You wanted to say Stephen King right there.
So he's had that for like 30 years.
Yeah.
So it's finally looking like it's moving forward. It's actually a director from the Handmaid's Tale. So that's looks like it's moving forward. So that should be a lot of fun to see what comes of that as we go a little bit further. But yeah, we'll definitely talk about it more next time. I'll make sure to have the guy's name on hand and look at maybe what else he's done, if he's done anything outside of that show. I still need to start that show. But yeah, it's going to be fun. Thank you guys for joining us. Yeah. Same bat time, same bat channel. In 2 weeks, we'll be here for roundtable number 69, I think.
No, we're past that.
No, I think 68 was last time. So really? See you then.
Bye, guys.